Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Jackie, and I'm an evolutionary astrologer. I follow Western Whole House. I also do tarot, but with my broken hand, I've had to kind of step away from the tarot. Still doing it in my private readings, but on the channel, it would just be too much. I'm doing fine, by the way. I'm healing. We got a little movement going on here, so that's good. Hopefully, the PT will keep working. Thank you so much for all of you who've reached out and sent me your love and light. I so appreciate it. So, guys, we're going to continue on this little, let's call it a self-help journey. Last week we spoke about Chiron. Now, we spoke about Chiron according to sign and house placement. Chiron is a very big topic, and he's far too big to cover in one video. So I'm actually going to be breaking it into three. So let's call last week's the first, okay, the chapter one, let's say. Today's going to be chapter two. And a lot of you reached out to me, and a lot of you felt like a lot of the messages really hit home. Chiron is a big deal, especially in evolutionary astrology. He is the trauma key. It's where where we experience that greatest pain that's put upon us that we're meant to have in this life, right? And it's no one's fault. It's not about blaming anybody. It's Chiron. In order to unpack Chiron, it's always best to just put it in context. We don't want to blame our caretakers. We don't want to blame anyone in particular. But it is this wound where we at some point become very empowered as well. So it's where we are our weakest, where we actually can become our strongest. And I say that can because we could always choose to sit growth out, right? We could always choose to just say, nope, I'm going to take life as it comes. A lot of people are not comfortable. Of course, it depends on what's going on in your 12th house. Truly not comfortable doing a lot of this deep work, but a lot of us are, right? So this is really just speaking to those of you who want to better understand why you do what you do. It's those very subtle pains that we feel in relationships. It's the things that we maybe don't really like about ourselves that end up showing up in relationships time and time again. And I'm not going to say it just has to do with your Chiron placement, which is what I want to discuss today. Your Chiron placement is the seed of your chart, in my view, as an evolutionary astrologer. And so we have to understand Chiron and what kind of grows out of it. So we have to understand today's video is going to be about really understanding Saturn and Uranus through the houses. Okay. Next week's video is going to be discussing the house placements and axis that are really going to be very focused on the solutions. So today is more about looking at the reasons behind why you have your Chiron return, not only the part of life that it shows up in, but a little more specifically, why, and then also strategy, right? But we're not talking about solutions yet. We're going to get to that next time. This is more about Uranus wants to give us strategy to forge forward in our life, like really looking at what do we have to do? What do we have to embrace? Next week's video is going to be a little more pragmatic, direct application, but we need to have these foundational understandings. So we have to understand last week's video. What sign is your Chiron in, as well as what house? It's very important. If you're cusped like me, you have to look at both signs. So if you're at, I'm going to say 27, 28, 29, 0, 1, or 2 degrees, you're a cusp. You're both of those signs, right? So for me, I'm 29 degrees Pisces, so I also have to look at Aries. Mine is at 29 degrees in my third house, which is where Gemini lives. So I have to understand Chiron in Gemini. Because it's cusping with the fourth house, which is where the sign of Cancer lives, I have to understand Chiron in Cancer. So if you're cusped, you have to understand all four. If you're not cusped, right, and you are not within those degrees of your Chiron placement, you have to look both at the sign and understand that you experience it through the lens of the house sign, right? So if you have it in the fifth house, you experience it through the house, through the sign of Leo, sixth house of Virgo, and so on. I do splice it out in the video last week. So you just want to make sure that you're looking not only at the sign, but also at the house placement. It's the same thing with today's video. So if you have your Saturn, let's just say it's in, like me, I have my Saturn in the fourth house. So Saturn in Aries in the fourth house. So I have to understand Saturn in Aries and Saturn in Cancer. Okay. So it's the same thing here. So you want to make sure that you're looking for the sign. And you're going to notice when I chapter it out, I have it sign and or house. So you want to make sure that you're looking at both. So again, the Saturn energy is where we're going to start because that's where the heaviness in the chart is, right? This is where we need to understand we have to work through that Saturnian energy in order to heal Chiron, right? And so it's about how exactly can we stop that, right? And that's the thing, right? How to not keep perpetuating the wounds. We can't get rid of it, but we could certainly work through it. Absolutely. And we could gain so much. So let's start with Saturn, okay? So Saturn, who is Saturn, right? Saturn in our energy. Saturn represents responsibility. I have a little bit of a different take on Saturn, and a lot of you, I know a lot of you are astrologers already, and we could just respectfully not fully agree on this. Yes, Saturn is a malefic energy. He is. However, if we didn't have energies like Saturn, we would not grow. We would not get a whole lot done in a very healthy way because Saturn understands boundaries. Saturn understands structure that provides us with a positive framework inside which we can build, right? And it gives us again that structure or that limits, the limits that we need in order to have productive development. And it's that energy that forces us to reassess our liabilities as well as our assets. So it creates this framework of structure that we need. So, a lot of people are like, oh, but Saturn is so restrictive and he's slow and he's old and he's cranky and all of that stuff. Okay, we can look at it like that, glass half empty, or we could look at it glass half full. Yes, Saturn is very connected to age and time, but just imagine all the wisdom that he possesses. He doesn't only represent bad karma, he represents good karma as well. So we want to, when we're trying to unpack our stuff, for lack of a better term, let's always take a glass half full approach, right? Because there's no value add in anything else. But we have to understand that wherever Saturn is, there is going to be challenge. There can be struggle. There can be some loneliness. But man, oh man, are there a lot of lessons. So let's begin by understanding Saturn. So again, Saturn in Saturn through the houses, we have to look at this at these energies in the house placements and understand that it's in that part of our life, okay, that we need to unpack in order to heal our deepest wounds, okay? Now, again, guys, these are general videos, so you want to understand that and take it with a grain of salt in that way, right? These are not private, personal videos, but you want to take the pieces of information and apply them to your life, right? So we're going to begin with Saturn in the first house. Sorry about that. Saturn in the first house and or Aries. So Saturn in the first house and or Aries. If you have this in your energy, chances are you experience a very early reticence when it comes to expressing yourself. In other words, it's difficult for you to express yourself. Just keep in mind that Aries energy slash first house is very connected to self-expression. It's very connected to the I am. It's your path. It's that energy that you're walking. It's like I have the gumption to get out and do and tackle something and be and execute leadership energy in my life, right? All of that's amazing. But when Saturn's in there, Saturn's like, are you sure you're doing that right? Are you sure? And we can question ourselves. There's no doubt about it, right? There's no question. It's almost like that wise old grandfather saying, are you sure about that? Right? So you can be limited by feelings of inadequacy, like, I don't know, can I? And this certainly does spring from early childhood. It certainly does. You are responsible, you are reliable, and you're probably pretty careful and cautious about stuff. Now, with Saturn here, you're likely pretty reluctant about approaching life at all. You may cautiously venture out expecting the worst and are invariably worried that you won't meet the mark, that you won't get accomplish what it is that you're setting out to do. And you really have to challenge yourself in this energy. You really do. I just want to say that Saturn, and please don't be bummed out about this, but Saturn is debilitated here. Saturn is debilitated in houses 1, 4, 5, and 6. I have them in 4. So we can't allow ourselves to be like, wah, wah. It's like, oh man, the other 8 signs have them exalted. And why do we have it debilitated? It just means that we have to work harder, right? So you have to challenge yourself. It's like having a little man on your shoulder who repeatedly reprimands and is just like, nope, not good enough. You could do better than that. Come on now, color in the lines. You should have neater handwriting. You need to work harder. You need to not sleep so much. You need, whatever it is, right? And you imagine that others are constantly judging you and assessing you, when in fact it's actually really your own self-criticism, which gives you really the greatest problem that you need to deal with. Now, you may experience your physical body itself as awkward and uncomfortable, or you feel that your personality is inadequate or it's lacking in some way because of your difficulty in feeling easygoing and relaxed. It's difficult when you have Saturn in the first and or Aries to be like easy peasy, go with the flow kind of energy. You may present yourself in a very austere or sort of a very withdrawn manner where people are like, you know what I mean by like austere, and you might not even see yourself as that, but you can be rather withdrawn, at least the way people perceive you. Remember, in Aries and or the first house, it's people's perception, even if you're not really like that. So we could feel like that people vibe us that way. Or fearing that unless you are really careful, you might flub something, or you might look like silly and ridiculous to other people. You have likely developed a very dignified stance and posture in all that you do, where you're super careful, so much so to the point where you won't push yourself, because if you push yourself and you fail, then you have to deal with that. And it's almost like solidifying that false narrative, right? That's running within you, that you're not enough, or that, solidifying the narrative that you aren't able to do things, right? And even if you appear a bit, even let's just say, for lack of a better term, superficial on the outside, you're likely masking something insecure and problematic on the inside. And others may interpret your lack of confidence and reticence as cold and unfriendly, when that may not be the reality at all. Now, usually you have, or you can develop, a good sense of responsibility and willingness to work hard in life. Now, this may stem from a need to prove your worth to the world and a desire to receive some sort of collective validation or okayness. Like, yeah, you're doing a good job, right? And you need to hear that at a certain point, right? And for these reasons, you may be ambitious, exhibiting a very steely determination to, in fact, make something of yourself. But very often with this particular placement, early life has been experienced as difficult or restricting in some way. You may have felt that your childhood environment was either unsafe or unsupportive of your free expression and personal creativity. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that you were raised in an abusive environment. That's different. But it's more about you not feeling like you were able to exercise free expression, and that, that sort of inner child in the way that you would have really liked to. And yet, if you set your goals sensibly and very realistically, you will usually manage to achieve your objectives in life. But it could certainly be like something that you have to definitely set your mind to. At times you may have felt burdened with worries and responsibilities inappropriate for someone your young age, but yet later on in life you can usually make up for that fun and that spontaneity that you missed as a child. So it's not about, squishing this down into a sausage skin to make it go away, guys, right? You want to be able to just call it out and acknowledge it. And it's like, okay, maybe my parents had to work a lot, or they didn't have time for me, or they had their own issues going on, and I didn't get what I needed on a soul level. So I always felt very held back in a way where I never felt totally free to be me or go after what it is that I really wanted to go after. And I really need to look at that and unpack it, right? So that's the first thing that we have to look at, right? And recognize, as we're going to try to heal our Chiron, we have to see where is that weight living, right, in our chart, okay? So hopefully that was helpful. We're going to go on to Saturn in Taurus and or the second house. Okay, so Saturn in Taurus and or the second house. So Saturn's placement in the chart does indicate where there is the expectation of difficulty, limitation, and certainly testing. It could feel like that. So in this particular placement, insecurity and feelings of inadequacy are experienced in the area of money, possessions, values, and resources for you. And as well as your general sense of self and self-esteem. Now, keep in mind that second house and or Taurus energy goes beyond sense of self and money. It also does rule our internal organs. So Saturn in this placement is exalted, first of all. It's an exalted space. Saturn here can actually be very helpful overall to your health, where it doesn't mean that things won't come up and you won't be tested. Things can certainly come up, but you will have the wherewithal to deal with it, or things will take a very long time to manifest in a way where you're going to be able to more easily control it. So I kind of think that that's a good thing, you know, and if you think about it, right? But you can absolutely feel some sort of challenges in the sphere of money, again, and self-esteem, believing ultimately that your sense of worth or security cannot be provided by others, right? Really deeply, you're like, nobody's going to be able to bring me what it is that I need. You have a pressing need to like make it on your own. Even if you marry or inherit money, you still gain much greater satisfaction from what you earn yourself, for yourself, by yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like it's because with Saturn there, like stability is super important for you, and you don't want to leave that to chance. You don't want to leave that in somebody else's control, right? Now, some with this placement may be born into money, yet feel very watched or tested to see how wisely and effectively they actually use that money, or put that money to use, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Now, although financial stress is never pleasant for anyone or any situation, sometimes it does serve as a really powerful impetus to force you to develop your skills and your potentials than if money were no problem at all. You know what I mean? It's like, it sounds dramatic, but like being hungry is a great motivation to actually get out there and make more money so that you're not hungry, right? So it's the challenge serves as the impetus. You may even accumulate an enormous amount of money and possessions, yet you still feel very anxious and very threatened about your security. And so because of that, this position of Saturn might indicate the hoarder energy, right? Where everything needs to be guarded and kept in safety for fear that it might be snatched away. Now, we kind of touched on this idea last week when we were talking about Chiron and Taurus and or the second house, this idea of hoarder, being a hoarder. It does not only mean possessions. We can hoard our belief system where it's like, no, it has to be like this. This is what I need for my foundation, right? We could hoard belief systems about ourselves even, right? And it could be a little tricky because of what is across that Taurus and or second house energy, which would be a very we-based energy, be very Scorpio, be very much about shared resources, shared intimacy, shared goals. And when we have like a Saturnian energy there, we could be very sort of dug in to our own idea of what it is that we need, right? So that's where it can be a little tricky when it comes to sharing self in relationship. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, on a deeper level, you likely feel very unsure about your own innate worth and value from time to time, or you lack confidence in your actual ability to deal effectively with the material world. You may compensate for this by endeavoring to prove yourself through very conventional means, those very conventional outer hallmarks of success, right? I must be okay if I have a nice house, or if I'm living in the right neighborhood, or if I have the right car, or if I have two cars, or my kids are going to the right school, or if you know what I'm saying? Like all of these, societal sort of boxes, right? That society will tick off too, to say like you're an okay member of functioning society, right? Or you may disguise your concern about these things by belittling the importance of money and the material sphere in life, equally so, and just kind of in general. You could belittle like people who have a lot of money, they're so full of, things like that. You put that down, and push away, especially if you're having a hard time bringing that success to yourself. You could belittle those who actually have that. And you don't want to do it. There's not even any malice involved in it. It's just a way of protecting your own energy. Now, the inner resources of Saturn in this placement can certainly manifest as cautious planning, tact, great perseverance, and significant patience, which is very nice to have. Developing these qualities will prove really, really productive for you. Now, I had that little pause there because going back to two videos ago when I did the videos on the retrogrades, make sure, if you have your Saturn retrograde, keep in mind that this may be a little more challenging for you to tap into, but it's not impossible, right? It's not impossible. It's just about working a little bit harder. And through facing challenges of the material world and finding your own worth and your own value, your own sense of self, right? Really embracing your own value system in a comfortable way, you are certainly spurred on to greater achievements and a deeper appreciation of life in general. This is very, very connected to your nodal energies and lessons, um, especially because of this Taurus second house energy. Because Taurus second house energy is very connected to ancestral patterns. It's very connected to, how we process our deep inner sense of self, right? So we want to understand that we have to call out our feelings here. Now, let me just say that the weight that you feel, right, on achieving, fill in the blank, whether it's money or becoming the version of yourself that you would most like to be, or solidifying a healthy belief system and sense of self-concept, right? That's where the weight is in your chart. Okay. So that's where you have to call out where you can have some challenges, despite the fact that you might even be working through them. We're understanding we're connecting this to Chiron, right? So we have to recognize the weight of Saturn, and then we're going to look at Uranus as far as strategy goes, right? So hopefully that makes sense for you. So again, this was for Saturn in Taurus and or the second house. I hope this was helpful for you guys. See you next time. Saturn in the third house and or the sign of Gemini. This is for you. Now, one of the main issues with Saturn here, okay, is expressing yourself to people in a way that it can be understood. Now, I do want to just say that Saturn is exalted here. Saturn is exalted in third house, Gemini energy. Saturn is only debilitated in the first house, the fourth house, which is where I have mine, fifth house and sixth house. The other eight houses, Saturn is exalted there. But this can be very frustrating when it comes to expressing yourself again to other people in a way that can be understood. Your early environment may have felt very dangerous for your safety in some way, or very held back, very slow. You could have experienced a lot of challenges from siblings and extended family. There could have been, difficulties, right? That presented situations that were not conducive to easy and open exchanges with other people in your life, okay? And as a result, you may walk around harboring the belief that nobody understands what you're talking about, or you hold back feelings and thoughts because you don't want to bother or go through the pain in the assness of being misunderstood or misinterpreted or having things used against you, you share something with somebody and then they inevitably use it against you. You don't want to deal with that. You just don't want to deal with it. So here, you might at times appear a little aloof. So for some of you may come off as even shy or arrogant or even ignorant when you're not. You're really just uncomfortable communicating. And such insecurities about your intellect and how articulate you are have various repercussions, right? Those insecurities, there's another side to that, and there are some repercussions. So, compensating for a sense of inadequacy in this area, you might try to prove yourself by developing a very precise and exact verbal and or mental style. The Saturn here many times ends up manifesting as the kind of like serious, orderly, processed thinking, right? It's very logical, it's very left brain, it's very this, then that, then that, then that, right? That's for some of you. Others with this placement often disguise their awkwardness in this arena by becoming an anti-intellectual and putting others down who are too stuck in their head or upright or very pseudo or very, very like, you know what I'm saying? Like in their head, very felt like love to hear themselves talk, like that kind of thing. Now, this placement, right, having your Saturn in the third house into a Gemini can have a lot of difficulty making small talk or constantly engaging in battle in order to avoid revealing what's really going on inside your head. So you be argumentative, or you can, you know what I mean? Or you just don't want to have the small talk. Right? I find manifests the most with people with this placement. It's like zero patience for small talk. Because Saturn here is actually very serious. So more serious and connected conversations with people who are not judgmental are more appreciated than any other placement. Now, Saturn in this house can certainly limit your sense of having free expression of movement. This may stem from an early childhood experience of an environment that maybe didn't feel safe or allow that level of flexibility. Like maybe you felt like you couldn't go out with your friends, or you felt very restricted when it came to what you were able to um, accomplish within your education, right? Within school. Or maybe you felt like you didn't really fit in your neighborhood, right? This could also manifest physically. Sometimes maybe you suffered like a crippling sense of restriction or loneliness while you were growing up, right? Right, where it really manifested on more of like a psychological, it could be, psychophysical as well. If children are kept too much in a harness during particular stages of development, that natural curiosity and desire to explore and imitate and learn skills will be greatly, greatly diminished, right? So you may have experienced that early in your life, right? Also, with Saturn here, you may benefit from therapy or techniques which enable you to re-experience the early kinds of movements and mobility desired, early, but that were denied in one way or another, right? In that earlier time of your life. So, recognizing where you felt this feeling held back within your family structure from siblings or extended family, or maybe you felt like you didn't belong in school, like you just felt like different, right, from the people that you were in school with, whatever it was, right? Therapy can really help with this. It's very common for this placement to have issues surrounding, again, siblings, extended family. You could find siblings and extended family to be burdens, to you, or even restrictive or exceedingly uptight in one way or another. We just don't really see eye to eye. Now, you likely had some issues with early education, as I mentioned a moment ago, and a difficult adjustment to school in general. A lot of people with displacement school, that I have found, school for a lot of people felt more like a kind of exile or like banishment, like a punishment, just not a good experience, overall. And all that said, the whole point of Saturn here is not that, you're condemned to a life of some sort of like inarticulate misery, hobbling around on, crutches, missing, rides and taxis and buses and trains, Instead, it's more about an invitation to develop the potential of a very deep and steady mind and to refine the capacity to communicate more clearly with others and to discover that kind of joy that learning about something brings. It's not about pushing it away, but it's about embracing that very thing that can make you feel super uncomfortable. And that would be necessary as you're trying to heal your Chiron wound, is looking at, because remember, this represents the weight in your chart. There's like a weight there that in order to heal that inner wound, that deep inner child, we have to understand that Saturn placement. And then we're going to look at Uranus to understand strategy. All right, guys, hopefully that was helpful. Okay, guys, so Saturn in the fourth house and or in the sign of Cancer. This section is for you. Now, for you guys, home may not have been very supportive in your early life, resulting in you feeling a lack of firm footing in life. Later, you may build a solid foundation based on your own hard work, your own home life, and creating a solid base for yourself, independent of whatever or however it is that you were raised. But if you have the Saturn energy in the fourth, that fourth house energy, that idea of early home environment, the idea of what home means to you needs to be unpacked. I have my Saturn in the fourth house. Now, this placement represents the base of operations where you meet life, right? And a lack of firm footing in life can become problematic, right? And that's the very thing that you probably feel here. Like you never got the actual firm footing that you feel like you need to become the person that you probably later realize you may have been, I want to say this carefully, that you may have wanted to become, but because of circumstances, you weren't able to manifest it for yourself, which just means that you weren't meant to become that thought that you have in your head, right? This placement does represent not only your inner base of operations and your first family, right? It's very connected to roots, race, culture, ancestral patterning. So this is the second stop for ancestral patterning. The first one is the second house and a Taurus, and this is the second stop for ancestral patterning. This is more about direct application. So what it is that you experience in your early environment, how much do you take with you as you move forward? Now, a lot of you may say, I am nothing like, the people who raised me. Okay, so you took that and you said, I need to do the opposite of this. Right. And that could have its own set of issues just as much as, obviously, if it was a healthy environment, you want to do exactly where it is that you're from. But if it was a challenging environment, doing the opposite to spite that negative energy is actually not healing that negative energy. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. But there could be some sort of difficulties and restrictions with respect to this idea, again, of family background, your inner base of operations, roots, ancestral patterns, race, things like that. Now, you may not have experienced your early environment, again, in that supportive way, where specifically there was something cold about it. There was something unloving, at least to you. Now, this doesn't mean that your caretakers didn't love you, but we all come into this world with our own soul and our own light bulb. And what lights up our soul or what lights up our light bulb is going to be very subjective. It's going to be very unique to us. So they might have loved us, but were we getting loved in the way that we needed, or did we feel deprived in some way? Perhaps your family was impoverished or struggled materially as you were growing up. Now, on the other hand, maybe money wasn't a problem at all, but rather a lack of emotional closeness in the family. That could certainly be it. And that could have like messed with or obscured in some way your sense of belonging and well-being in general. Like, what does it mean to belong? What does it mean to experience actual well-being and feeling balanced? But in one way or another, you likely felt unwanted in some way, or that life was not on your side, or that you were somehow a problem, right? Where maybe you felt like it's not so much that you were unwanted, but you were like a burden, right? So you weren't what you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, well, if things were different, maybe my parent would be more engaging, my caretaker would be more engaging or want me, but because of reality, I feel more like a burden, right? And that life was somehow, again, not on your side. So certain basic requirements of love and security were just not met. And consequently, it made you wonder what was actually wrong with you. And situations like being hungry and not being fed, or wanting to be held closely, or reassured of things, or just made to feel a lot more stable and secure, those were needed, right? But nobody seemed to be around when you were in need. And this likely made you feel that you must be inadequate. You must be the one failing in some way, that you have some sort of flaws. And that ends up messing with your deepest sense of self, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. It colors this. It's like the you living inside of you is a not good enough version of you. And your sense of security or okayness is not easily found from outside sources. Instead, you are going to have to discover your own strength and support and solid energy within yourself, right? You're going to have to find that absolutely within yourself and love yourself from within. If this is achieved, then Saturn in this placement is truly, truly a blessing in disguise. Once you establish your sense of value and worth from within, and you're not looking outside of yourself, then the outside world can never take that away from you, right? I mean, this is the absolute golden precious gift of Saturn in this placement, but it is about figuring that out. No one is going to save you. You saving yourself is going to be unbelievably liberating. And it's likely that you had issues with your father. Sometimes he was not around at all. In other cases, he was physically there, but he was psychologically absent. Maybe he was just caught up in his own stuff. He might have been experienced as cold, very conventional, very critical. Some of you may have experienced your father energy as materialistic and rigid, or a burden. Or there could have even been some sort of circumstance due to poor health problems. But there was some sort of issue going on with dad. Maybe you worshiped your dad, but maybe there was a divorce involved and you weren't able to have him in your life, or any version, but there's some sort of issue around father energy. Now, you may feel that you have failed your father in some way, or what's worse, that you have transgressed not just him, but the whole family, your race, your background, and even God as well. And that's something to look at, right? Where you grew up not only with a nagging sense of guilt that you are not good enough, but also with a great deal of suppressed anger and resentment directed at those you feel are unappreciative of you and who judge you. You don't appreciate that. And it's only a matter of time before calling this out. And this idea of, transgressing that first family and transgressing all of the ideologies that you were raised with can actually be very empowering. It doesn't mean you never have to speak to your family again. It's just finding your own sense of self within all of that. And untangling this kind of knot, obviously, is never easy and will take a long time if it's done at all. A lot of people with it here will make the choice to not do it at all. Right? Again, Saturn in the first house, fourth house, fifth and sixth, difficult to unknot, right? It just is. But a major step is achieved when you do ask yourself, what do I really need in order to feel emotionally safe, emotionally secure, like I'm okay, right? What do I need? And you may find that this is not that dissimilar to what you believed a harsh parent was trying to shove down your throat. Or once you discover what it is that you need, you can proceed to build it or provide it for yourself and let your depriving father or whoever it is that created the deprivation in this area and the weight in this area off the hook for not providing it. where there's just this level of acceptance. It's like, look, I was just meant to bring this to myself. It's definitely a tricky position because you can often feel deeply inadequate and mistrusting of others, yet you yearn for something permanent and stable in your life. You may compensate for your sense of insecurity by acquiring land or property, or on a more mundane level, Saturn here suggests duties and responsibilities in the domestic sphere and problems setting up a home. Be very difficult for you to ever feel completely at home and in the environment that you envision for yourself. Wherever Saturn is, just keep in mind hard work and persistence and making the most even of a limited situation can pay off unbelievable dividends. Okay. Now, with this placement, it can take a long time to establish your inner strength and identity, but once it's found, it's solid and it's enduring. I've often seen this placement in the charts of older people who discover what they feel is their true work or mission and pursue a project or some sort of study with great commitment in the second part of life. Remember, Saturn rules age. So here, and having this placement as well, life is built on a deep need for stability and a search for an authentic sense of self, self-worth, purpose, and value. It's very important to you. So looking for these things from the outside is certainly going to prove uncertain, not okay. All of this has to come from you, my friends, okay? You could do it. I've been working on mine for years, and we never stop because we're always growing, we're always evolving. There are always extra layers to the onion of self that we have to always shut off. But once you shine a light on it, it's so much easier to deal with. It truly is. So again, Saturn represents the weight in our chart that we have to unpack in order to heal our Chiron wound. Okay, guys, thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Okay, so Saturn in the fifth house and or Leo. This placement makes freely expressing your individuality and personal creativity a bit difficult. You might desperately want to be loved for your specialness and your originality, and yet feel that it's precisely your differentness that you feel puts others off. So why is that? For one reason or another, you have had that playful child inside of you rebuffed, that playful child told to sit down, be quiet, who do you think you are, kind of thing. Right. And there is this psychologist, Karen Horney, and she suggests, in the same way that a pear seed develops into a pear, human beings naturally grow into their intrinsic potential, provided various adverse circumstances don't stand in their way from happening. Right. So a lot of times children only feel loved and accepted when they're living up to their parents' desire, whatever it is the parents' desire for them is. So it's like, oh, is that daddy and mommy paying attention? What do they want me to be? Am I being that? So it's likely that rather than risk revealing who you are in yourself, you learn to hide your own uniqueness just for the sake of conforming to your parents' expectations, or your caregivers' expectations. Mispulled your energy to then be directed into this image of who you should be, rather than being able to unfold in your own right? So there was that level of restriction that was implemented very early in life. And it's like, again, though, who do you think you are? Can you really do that kind of thing? And a kind of alienation from real self occurs. And that spontaneous flow of self becomes blocked by rigidity and doubt and insecurity. And it's like, again, I see this a lot in the charts of people who really, truly struggle from imposter syndrome, the who do I think I am kind of thing. And this leads to you watching yourself. You know what I mean? Watching yourself, while your real light stays hidden behind these fears and behind these insecurities. The discrepancy between your real self and your contrived identity can certainly leave you feeling very unhappy and very uncertain as to what it is that you're meant to be producing in this world, right? Because it's fifth house Leo is very much about our creativity, the energy that allows us to connect with others in relationship, to have children, to connect to children, to create our own business. You can have some sort of challenges here. So ultimately, the challenge of Saturn in this position is to find ways to free your trapped creative energy, right? Your mother and father are no longer watching over you at a certain point. So you need to give yourself true permission to allow that spontaneous and that very creative child inside of you to come out and manifest in the way that it's meant to manifest in this lifetime, right? So remember now, wherever the Saturn energy is in our chart, if you have it in the fifth house and/or Leo, this is where there's a lot of weight, which needs to be unpacked in order to really deal with that Chiron wound. Okay, guys, hopefully this was helpful. Bye-bye. See you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so Saturn in the sixth house and/or Virgo. This position normally confers organizational, administrative ability. You guys are really good with that, as well as the capacity to pay very close attention to detail. Now, we do want to say that houses 1, 4, 5, and 6, they are debilitated. Saturn is debilitated in these places. I don't want that to bum you out. This is nothing to be concerned about. Just means you're going to have to work a little harder in this area. You're very good at paying attention to detail, though. Now, at the same time, a compulsive need to order the environment in this way can certainly denote some deeper fears and a very real mistrust of life, which has to be looked at. This mistrust of life, it has to be looked at. With this placement, daily life and daily routines, which is sixth house Virgo energy, those requirements can feel very oppressive and exceptionally demanding. Managing the basic affairs of like day-to-day stuff, like paying bills or cleaning the house or cooking or whatever it is, can become really complex, very pressing. It can feel very heavy on you as like, this very heavy thing that you have to navigate through. You need routine, though. You need routine and ritual. And yet, at the same time, there is a danger of being frustrated and trapped by the very structures that you create. So, like, this is, I see this show up in the charts of a lot of people where they're very hard workers. And they're not afraid of hard work. They're more afraid of, like, how is that weighted responsibility going to end up impacting day-to-day life? And are they going to feel too overwhelmed? Or are they going to feel too restricted? Or are they going to feel too held back? So it's very interesting because it's something that's craved, but yet it's something that's difficult to manifest in a certain healthy way, because issues can arise, in all like sixth house Virgo areas, which is your day-to-day work environment. Yes, is one thing, but it's also the area of health and the efficient functioning of body. So for some of you, health problems curtail or limit your individual freedoms, such as special diets, maybe you have allergies or certain physical exertions, which must be restricted in order to prevent negative consequences, right? So anything having to do with the health. Now, within this placement, symptoms of ill health should be examined as symbols or messages forcing themselves into your awareness, offering an awakeness and awareness to needing to change something, right? Because the body systems, right? I mean, with this system, there's a huge connection between like mind, body, right? And with this placement, there is this, system imbalance, right, can actually show up in the form of an illness and disease in an attempt to show where something is off or just not right. And it could, obviously, like if it's an acute stress, it's going to show up in the shoulders. If it's a stress that's, long standing, it may show up as lower back issues, gastro issues, second house, Saturn in the second house. A lot of times there are gastrointestinal issues. I'm just giving that as, as an example, but it's this kind of thing that we really want to pay attention to, right? Particular health problems may come through very, Saturnian areas like the skin or the bones or the knees, the joints. Arthritis can happen here, issues in that arena. With Saturn here, you can participate in your health not only in direct ways, such as like with diet and exercise, but also through adjusting and really looking at overly rigid or psychological attitudes, like where you just too dug in. If these challenges are met, you will grow not only stronger, but also a lot wiser. Now, this placement can also describe you as a health nut, right? Who is exceptionally cautious about what they eat, everything that comes into their body, how you exercise. How much sleep you get, right? You could be very, very rigid, right? For a lot of you, because Saturn rules career, you may even make a career for yourself in the health or healing profession. Right? Now, it would be expected that you experience problems here, though, in the area of work. There can be an over amount or a high amount, I guess I should say, of criticism of those with whom you work, or a fear of being unaccepted or inadequate in the eyes of your coworkers or your bosses. Shadowy and unintegrated parts of your own psyche can certainly be projected onto those you meet at work, or people who do various jobs for you, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be your coworkers or people in an actual workplace. It could be maybe a person doing construction on your house, or the person at the grocery store who's ringing you out, or the person who's doing your manicure at the nail salon, because technically those people are working for you, right? Because you're hiring them for a service. So there can be this kind of thing as well. So there can be that, projection onto them. So that's just something that can come up that you want to just be mindful of. You can find your place in the scheme of things, though, right, within that realm, by developing and fine-tuning your marketable skills and abilities in the workplace. This will not necessarily come without dedication and effort, obviously, and maybe even having to start at the bottom in order to work your way up. That's very common when we have Saturn in any of the work houses, the triangle, right? So that's houses 10, 2, and 6. A lot of times when Saturn is there, we have to start off in that apprenticeship, or maybe that low paying, in order to work ourselves up. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's just something to keep in mind. And I know that might sound like mundane, might sound very trivial, but that's a really good approach in this energy, right? There's a lot of upside to it. Now, also, the sixth house does rule our pets and our small animals. So your relationship to your animals can have very special importance in this place, where the death or loss of a dearly loved pet can open up an absolute Pandora box within you of psychological and philosophical issues. Having Saturn in the sixth, you get deeply connected to your animals, to your fur babies, right? And it's very real. It's nothing to giggle at there. We all love our pets, but there's a specialness about this placement. If you have Saturn in the sixth house and or the sign of Virgo. Okay, guys, so hopefully that was helpful. Remember, Saturn is all about weight, the weighted part of our chart that we have to look at in order to heal that Chiron energy. Okay, see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so now for you guys, this is Saturn in the seventh house and or Libra, the sign of Libra. You have the ability to create responsible and very long-lasting relationships. You're committed to both intimate and business partners, because that seventh house is very connected to not only relationships, but business partners, bosses, your energetic output at work. Relationships are not that easy with Saturn here, and yet it is precisely the area through which you will be challenged to grow and examine yourself through these types of relationships. Trying to wriggle out of the hot seat in a relationship. You might complain that the right man or the right woman has just never come along, or you could easily moan that some flaw in a partner is the root of all the trouble, and you might have really good points there. But rather than just blaming fate, like, why does this happen to me, or bad luck or poor choices, really look inward here so that you can unearth the reasons for the way that you're feeling, right? What is really happening here? Is a lot of times with Saturn in the seventh house and or Libra, there were not good representations of relationship early on. So it's like, what's your blueprint having to do with relationship? Or you're constantly trying to replicate what it is that you were raised in, right? And we can never do that, really, right? Because we're our own energies, we're our own people. Now, wherever there is Saturn, there is fear. This is really important for you to understand, right? Because there's fear surrounding relationship. There's fear surrounding these soul connected energies. And very often, those with this placement obstruct relationships because they're frightened of becoming too deeply involved with others. You may be afraid of the degree of commitment a relationship requires and terrified of becoming too dependent on someone else, dreading and half expecting to be hurt. You could feel that you can't risk the vulnerability of true intimacy. And it's often the case that with this particular placement, in order to trace the origins of these complexes, you have to go back to your earliest relationships. Now, not only the relationships where you felt loved or unloved, but also the relationships that you experienced through the elders in your life, right? And really looking at this idea of mirroring, right? Because seventh house Libra energy is all about mirroring. It's this idea of reflection, right? So it doesn't matter, like, if you have your whatever energy is in your seventh house, that's how you show up in relationships, right? And it's also what it is that you look for in relationship that would be a nice compliment to you, right? That kind of energy. But we have to understand where it is and the complexes of those early relationships. Now, thinking about it pragmatically, did you open up to a parent at some point and then experience hurt or rejection or misunderstanding where you just wanted to dump what was on your heart and you didn't feel accepted? You felt you were made to feel like there was something wrong with you. If that was the case, you may still anticipate being unlovable or unaccepted by others, or again, looking at that early parental marriage or again, caretakers. Was it so atrocious as to obliterate the very idea of a happy union, on a subconscious level where you just believe it's not really possible, right? Because if that's the deal, then it's really tough for you to actually learn from your parents' mistakes, right? So by seeking answers and solutions to these kinds of questions, you grow a lot wiser about yourself, your relationships, and really life in general and how it is that you engage with other people. And that's what I think the actual gift of Saturn is here. Saturn, by the way, is exalted in the seventh house. He's just debilitated primarily in houses 1, 4, 5, and 6. Additionally, I have seen some instances with people with their Saturn here who complain that their partners are or were too limiting and too restricting, right? And if only it weren't for their spouse, they would accomplish so much more in life. Or sometimes this is true if you have chosen to consciously or unconsciously chosen the wrong people. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but again, wherever Saturn hangs out, we have lessons to learn, right? There's a lot of weight here. So we can easily end up picking the wrong people. Why? Because we're meant to learn lessons, right? But you can feel like you're not conscious about it. Chances are that you end up picking tyrannical types of people, to be in partnership with. And this is more a matter of really projecting your own internal blocks and fears of stretching yourself, emotionally onto partners, that fear. And what do I mean by that? Stretching. Stretching means not only allowing yourself to be more vulnerable in relationship, but to drop the fear and to allow trust to take its place. Very different, very difficult, very difficult. So sometimes it's easier to find flaws and fault with others because it's a way of protecting ourselves, because then we don't have to allow ourselves to be that level of vulnerability. So we really have to look at these things for sure here. Even when you are free, right, supposedly, of that partner or that boss, You will likely just find other reasons for not venturing forth and expanding yourself. So you really do need to look at those inner obstacles when it comes to, right, engaging in these kind of relationships. Now, you may look for a partner, a lot of you, who is safe. Sometimes the least risky ones are those who do not engender an enormous amount of passion, where it's like, okay, well, the intimacy isn't so great, but I don't have to worry about them, right? Or, the passion is there, so I don't, but they don't really make good money, so I'll make the money, or something like that. Because they serve more as a kind of like a protection policy. This is not for all of you, this is some of you. This is a way that it can manifest. You may deliberately choose partners whom you feel are inadequate or lacking in certain respects. Therefore, if the relationship fails and the other person walks out the door, you can reassure yourself that you're better off without that no good person, right? Whereas others of you with this placement seem to select partners who have the same weaknesses as you do. And then you proceed to batter the other person for those things that, you feel that you identify in the other person, that you parts of yourself that you identify in a partner. Right? This unhappiness that you feel deep on a soul level about yourself, you identify it in a partner and you beat them up for it, right? And I know this is heavy, but like this is a very psychological placement. Now, Saturn here may marry very late in life or not find a very, let's say, complete and fulfilling union until somewhat older, as if Father Time must teach you a thing or two before a truly mutual and healthy relationship can be formed. Now, more mundanely, lawsuits may be very long and drawn out, and it might be advisable, if you have this particular placement, to settle out of court when and if you can, if you're ever in that particular situation. So I hope this was helpful in some way. Thanks for hanging with me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Saturn in the eighth house and or in the sign of Scorpio, okay? This is for you. So Saturn in this placement gives you apprehension and difficulties in the area of intimacy, sharing, and joint resources in particular. You might feel insecure about what you have to give, in a relationship, or experience some difficulty receiving what somebody else is offering. More generally, there is a fear of letting go, of merging and blending with another person. So to truly, and I mean truly merge with someone, that's like really scary for you. It's really scary for you. Merging with someone else means the death of a self as a separate individual. And this is a very frightening prospect for you, especially if you want to hold on to what you value and possess. And in addition to that, letting yourself go in a relationship entails the possibility of being overtaken by feelings, that you've attempted to keep very tight under very rigid control, where there's a lot of fear around relationship, a lot of fear around letting go. That rigid control, rage, jealousy, envy, passions of like very primitive, right? And very instinctive nature, right? You desperately crave a close union. There's no question about that. You want that. You want that very close union. Yet you withdraw from it, fearing being overwhelmed by any sort of unwelcome eruptions that you feel are inevitable. And you may feel like that because this has been your experience. Now, subsequently, you may have difficulty relaxing and just being open and just trusting with other people, all of which can give rise to sexual problems, right? Where you're just not feeling that comfort to just organically be who it is that you are. Right? And really looking into the root causes of any inhibitions in this area deepens and really does enrich your self-knowledge and your understanding in that arena so that it could be healed, right? We have to look at that. Again, remember, Saturn represents the weight in our chart that feeds our Chiron wound, that deep, deep wound, that where we can become most wise, but it's only after we heal that energy. Now, besides any sort of potential sexual hangups, there are conflicts, pooling resources, and making personal adjustments in relationships. Your partner's beliefs or values can differ from from yours, right? And in fact could even contradict yours. Or you may even choose a partner who is a genuine burden in some way. It could be financially, it could be they're always getting themselves in trouble, right? Because that 8th energy, Scorpio energy could be things that hang on the periphery of society, right? So we have to be careful of that. But this idea of differing, right? And yet helping out with the welfare of others may be precisely what Saturn here needs, right? Just for your own personal development. There can be trouble at some point in your life with having to do with inheritance or taxes or business contracts and the possibility of very drawn out divorce proceedings, if you were to get divorced. You can have a career dealing with other people's money, such as a banker, investment consultant, stockbroker, or an accountant, right? Could also be anything dealing with astrology, the occult, anything in the psychological realm, like a psychologist or a detective, even. But in general, you may hesitate to probe too deeply beneath the surface of life, yet this is what is needed for your growth and maturity. So if you attempt to maintain rigid control over yourself, you're likely to be very frightened by the prospect of death and what looms, in the potential afterlife. You could be really, really scared. Saturn in the 8th, you could be really, really scared of dying, really, really scared to unpack those psychological issues. Really see, and it's not that you don't want to, but there's a real fear here, but actually embracing this can really provoke you into a very serious pursuit of more knowledge, in this area, in the idea of death and afterlife, in the psychological realm. A couple of really good friends of mine who are great astrologers have Saturn in the 8th as well. It's a nice placement for that, but you have to embrace it and deal with it first. Otherwise, it's going to inhibit you, right? Again, remember, this is where the weight hangs out. So we need to unpack this. So hopefully that was helpful, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, so Saturn in the 9th and or the sign of Sagittarius. Now, you encounter the serious, methodical, conservative, and very apprehensive Saturn in the sphere of religion, philosophy, higher education, travel, the manifestation of father energy, importing and exporting, foreign land, I think I said travel, but it's foreign, like dealing with foreign entities. This is also very connected to like launching, publishing, marketing, advertising, as well as negotiating. Right, this idea of being able to negotiate. Now, you likely have an interest in religion and philosophy and the need to find definitive answers to basic questions concerning the meaning and patterns of existence as it is. Unlike Jupiter here, right? Because Jupiter does rule the 9th house, but unlike Jupiter here, who can justify almost anything he wants to do, Saturn in this space has this sense of it's like the divine mixed with some sort of older opinionated energy. Could also bring on this idea that God is like this. It's like that stereotypical, like old, tyrannical, judgmental, stern, you know, liable to punish you for the slightest little thing that you did wrong, right? Like that God that we're supposed to be afraid of. You might have been brought up like that, right? This very sort of umbrella of conventional and very, perhaps even an orthodox form of religion, and your spiritual superego is very strong and is very inhibitive. So you may feel that what God likes and dislikes is clearly defined and that there are very strict rules and laws which designate how life should be lived. This is what should happen, right? And to transgress those spells, disaster, consequence, just horrible experiences, but punishment, right? But you may be caught in the outward trappings of religion, obsessed with observing the exact letter of the law and forgetful of the inner meanings behind these forms. So this is certainly not to say if you are very embraced, well, I mean, keeping it real, if you're watching my channel, you probably have your own version of religion. Um, you know, uh, no blasphemy here on my channel. I don't believe that. I just believe that the sky is actually God's workshop, and that's why he put the planets and the stars in the sky for us to interpret so that we can work our lives in a more effective way while we're here, right? That's my belief, right? So it's a very sort of outside of the box kind of thing. Um, but you may feel that as well. I mean, some of you just may be like very against the idea of God because of that controlling energy. It can take some work to understand that that's not God at all. And that, if you feel passionately about it, to develop a more balanced understanding of whatever the word is that you were raised in. And I say it like that because, maybe it's whatever it is, if it's the Bible, if it's, what it's the Torah, whatever it is, having this, looking at it from different perspectives, right? To understand that it's not only one way, right? It's not only one way. So just, allowing yourself to open up to that, right? To this idea of, Sagittarius ninth house energy also is very connected to our politics and our political leanings, having to do with the law, legalities, local governance. And so with Saturn here, we can be very, very dug in to what it is that we believe, right, is the right thing to do. But there is so much benefit to actually sort of stepping outside of this, And while you may fear that, because Saturn here can really put this very real fear in you that you are not enough for God. You also worry that God is not doing his job very adequately, and you could take up that burden of trying to really hyper control your own life. You might also experience similar kinds of feelings about, your father, you know, where, no matter what you do, you're not enough, right? Or, you have to pick up the slack of where father energy couldn't show up. Could even be like this with your in-laws as well. But Saturn in this space can also give rise to what Erica Jung calls the fear of flying. And so while Jupiter is in the ninth, it's all about ruminating about all things that he's going to be able to do, right? Jupiter's just like, let me think about how am I going to grow? How am I going to advance myself? How am I going to make money? How am I going to level myself up? Saturn here is frightened of its own potential and becomes really afraid of taking risks. So it's likely that every time you lift your arms up to reach for the sky, you can't get there, right? Something inhibits you. And such negative expectations don't roll out well for obviously your confidence, your sense of self, and the success that you're trying to tackle in any of the projects or the ventures that you're trying to take on. And so slowly and with persistence, you can sort through the doubts and the hesitations and arrive there in the end, sometimes even before Jupiter, who has changed his mind and veered off in another direction entirely. It's just the way that Jupiter works in this placement when Saturn is in the house. But for you guys, it's very, very important for you to look at how you experienced your father energy, whoever your male caretaker energy was in your life. You need to really unpack that for good or bad, right? Whatever it is, and really understand it and how it may have colored your ability to grow in life. Okay. Now, there's one more thing that I want to mention on more of a mundane level. It's likely that at some point you will find difficulties or feel uncomfortable with a great deal of travel. All right. You may reside abroad out of necessity or travel in connection with your work, but your idea of fun is usually not wandering around the world to see what happens next. You could find it much more reassuring to have your future planned. But ironically, here, those times when things feel the most unsure, insecure, and empty, and you have to trust and believe in whatever the next day brings, that's exactly where your growth is going to happen. It's like throwing caution to the wind and not being so structured in those areas and opening up your mind to different ways of thinking is actually where that not only that growth is going to happen, but that's where that's what needs to be unpacked in order for that Chiron energy to be healed. So I hope that made sense to you. Thanks for hanging with me, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hi guys. So for you, Saturn in the sign of Capricorn and or the 10th house. Okay? This section of the video is for you. Now, in his own placement, because Saturn does live in the 10th house in everybody's chart, and he's very exalted in his own placement, very elevated energy. Saturn absolutely works very powerfully here. So whether you acknowledge it or not, you are extremely sensitive about how other people see you. Saturn in this space, like the personal ego itself, wants to be seen as strong, solid, and enduring. Success is normally judged in terms of traditional values and roles, like the career status or what kind of house you own, the respectability of a marriage, those kind of things. But usually there is a need to achieve position and recognition through some sort of work, which is socially acceptable. You may be judgmental, even if quietly, and condemning of others who venture to live outside which mainstream society validates or considers okay or normal. But it's deeper than that, right? Because if you must constrict yourself, then why shouldn't others have to do the same? And you could be both envious and angry of those who don't. It's like, who do they think they are, hopping on that flight to go work wherever? Or how could they get away with that thing in work? Who do they think they are? Or, keep in mind that the 10th house and Capricorn energy is the manifestation of mother energy in our life. Meaning, if I were to say, so listen, tell me about your mom, especially in the 10th house position, you would probably say, there was some sort of strictness about her, or there were expectations, that there were always surrounding her. And that made you want to either you pushed away from that, right, if you felt too smothered, or that's just naturally where you find yourself, right, being very critical, right, of yourself in that arena. And the thing here, it's like the idea of responsibility having to do with, again, the right career and or marriage and or long-term goals, long-term plans, is a very serious business. And how could people live their life otherwise? Right? It's like, I don't get it. How could they do it? Yet, part of you secretly, very secretly, you could be like, man, kind of wish I could be like that. But then, no, 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 Saturn will come in and say, no, that's not responsible enough. But yet it's like, okay, you could certainly feel that way, right, from time to time. You may find that you have to work hard to achieve the respect and status that you want in life, right? You can realize your career aims through dedication and very like step by step, here I go, this is going to lead to that. I have to do this job in order to level up to that. Even if there are some obstacles in the way, it's like, okay, slow and steady wins the race. You may at times feel that any means justifies a winning end, right? So as long as you're going to end up where you need to end up, right? Even if it means compromising yourself or using others for your own gain to a certain degree. Right? This is just, again, something to be mindful of. Now, you may reach a plateau and then feel stuck in your efforts to go further in your life. Now, this can happen in career, but it could also happen in your marriage. It could also happen just when it comes to how it is that you're living your life, because this placement is very connected to our long-term plans. And, and that plateau can become very frustrating. In the same way, you may rise fairly quickly in a career, in a societal placement through a marriage or something like that, misuse your power and then topple just as fast, right? Maybe like marry into money, but then it goes to hell in a handbasket really quickly, and then you sort of, fall down from that space, just as fast there. But Saturn can bring you to your knees fairly easily in this house. I'm not going to lie, even though he's exalted here, he can bring you to your knees. So integrity and pure intentions and very diligent process are everything here. Everything, right? Now, with Saturn here, again, your mom was likely experienced as some sort of strict, could be a socializing force, very strict in an interpersonal way, the lawgiver, for lack of a better term, who decides what's acceptable and proper, right? So as a child with this placement, you may have you may have internalized those rules that I was just mentioning a moment ago, or later believed that that kind of obedience that she wanted is the same that should be given to society, that that's just the way that life is supposed to be. Your mother may have been felt as critical and cold or demanding and unloving, even if she loved you. Maybe she just wasn't, in your through your emotional lens, as loving and as warm as you would have liked. Whatever you did as a child was perhaps criticized, or you were never good enough, or maybe your mother seemed more like a burden and a responsibility at a certain point in your life. Someone you had to care for, rather than the usual way around, where you felt like you had to mother your mother instead of your mother mothering you. But certainly through a more hopeful lens, because he is exalted here, your mother could have served as a model of positive Saturnian qualities, exemplifying patience, discipline, durability, being very pragmatic, very determined, and that energy obviously would be a very positive absorption of her energy. But this placement finally is very typical. To indicate the energy of an organizer, again, an administrator, executive, a manager, a scientist, a building, and even a teacher. Very nice energies here. But we do want to unpack the weight of this in our chart in order to fully understand and heal our Chiron energy. Okay, guys? So I hope that was helpful in some way. I'll see you guys next time. Hi guys, so this part of the video is for you if Saturn is in either the 11th house or the sign of Aquarius. Now, Saturn is by nature very ambivalent about 11th house energy, which is the natural home of Aquarius. The urge to become more than we already are, right? On the other hand, Saturn is attracted by the lure of anything which offers greater security and prestige, right? He's terrified of the thought of having to open up and expand his carefully guarded boundaries. But since the 11th house does rule goals and gains, and Aquarius is very connected to the future, Saturn is very heavy here. So there can be a lot of the challenges here, and the lessons here are going to be around, what changes do you need to make and work on in order to create the future that you want, and not allowing yourself to be inhibited, right? Easily inhibited. You might experience a pressing need or desire here as well to join with others, because this is a 11th house in Aquarius energy is very connected to friends and group work, right? So that you could be a part of something, right? This idea of wanting to be part of something. You may often feel awkward, like you don't really fit in, or you could even feel very easily threatened by a situation. You could feel threatened by friendships. You could feel threatened by group works. You can feel unsafe when it comes down to sitting down and thinking about your goals and gains, especially when it comes to like retirement and am I going to have enough money later on, right? And these vulnerabilities, right, we're born in this space. Now, keep in mind, 11th house Aquarius energy opposes Leo 5th house energy, right? And so that's that energy of early childhood. So a lot of times when we have Saturn in the 11th, it's like we didn't get the tools in our toolbox to feel really brave and confident within ourselves, to go after what it is that we really want and need in life in general, to go after those friendships and feel really seen and heard and comfortable around them, because we were made to feel like something was a little off. You likely feel an easy kinship to those who are older than you, right? Because 11th house, again, is the energy of kinship, right? But Saturn is rules the idea of age, So you may feel a lot of comfort around people who are older than you, while feeling very challenged when it comes to maintaining lasting relationships, unless it's with somebody who totally gets you. You know what I mean? Like they understand you, they know, like, whatever your habits are, warts and all, those are the people that you really want to hold on to. It's not that you don't want friends, you really do. I mean, really do. But deep down, the the energy coming through Chiron is poking so deeply that you may not realize how profoundly some false narrative is working within you that you don't matter enough, right? And so this can really impact you being seen as vulnerable. And not feeling like you're allowed to just be you, right? Feeling that you have to somehow restrict yourself, which is very Saturnian. In a subtle way, you can disconnect, very Aquarian, with friends and other people in general. So the outcome of this is often trouble maintaining close friendships, as well as reaching your own goals in a truly satisfying way, right? Where does that come from, though? That's the weight. We're going to learn more. We're going to learn about Uranus when it comes to strategy in our chart, but we have to understand the Saturnian weight of this, right? Again, it's opposing the fifth house, which is very connected to our early childhood and our ability to be seen and our ability to be heard and feel like we matter, right? So there was definitely this compromise there that you do need to unpack in order to unpack that Chiron energy. Okay, guys, I hope that was helpful. See you next time. Bye-bye. Hi guys, so this part of the video is for you if you have Saturn in the 12th house and or Saturn in the sign of Pisces. Now, Saturn in this placement is often afraid of what lurks beneath the surface, that level of consciousness underneath things, behind the veil, right? And if you relax control over yourself, you can fear that you might be just completely engulfed by overwhelming emotion. So a lot of times with this energy here, I do want to say Saturn is all about protecting us in this placement. So I see this a lot with my clients where Saturn in the 12th wants to understand self. It's not that you're afraid of doing the deep, dark work. It's that Saturn controls the amount of layers that he will allow you to reveal within yourself. If he feels like a certain layer within you is not, if you're not ready to deal with that, he's not going to let you deal with it. Even if you want to, meaning you will literally not be able to see it. You won't be able to unpack that. You will eventually, because he's very slow, he's very steady, he's very much about time. And keep in mind, in the that 12th house is the bottomless ocean. Saturn will find the bottom somehow, though, and he will just stand there and be this force to control this house where things are very confusing and very nebulous without boundaries or borders. He's like, no, I'm going to help you. I'm not going to allow you to realize certain things in the space of time, in the span of time, or in the way that other people might, right? Now, the Neo-Freudians believe that in the name of security and social adaptability, we repress certain information. We repress certain drives and impulses and appetites, which others, or even our own ego, would find unacceptable, right? Obviously, we repress these things, but you may even go a step further. And it's literally, guys, it's like a separation. It's like a divorcing yourself from what's in your unconscious. And you can also inhibit a very positive and pressing desire, which exists in all of us, which is the urge to reconnect to the oneness of the rest of life. So you can literally, and I see this a lot, like isolate yourself from other people instead of experiencing joy at the prospect and the opportunity of merging with something greater than yourself, whether it's spirituality and religion, whether it's a higher level relationship, whatever it is, you likely subconsciously pull yourself back, recoil in horror at the thought of dissolution of your personal identity, where it's like, no way, man, if I do that, I'm going to lose myself. And then if I lose myself, I am going to be victimized, and then I'm going to be chewed up and spit out. So there can be a lot of very strong desire for control here, you know, and Saturn doesn't play around in this house, right? Seriously. Now, you may even suffer a type of guilt or despair where something inside of you tells you that you're not all that you could be. There's constantly this feeling like you're missing something. Some of you. Or you can struggle with a certain type of low level, maybe not so low level paranoia, where you have this feeling that someone or something is out to destroy you. In traditional textbooks, for a lot of you, and I know a lot of you have looked into a lot of, traditional interpretations of Saturn, Saturn in the 12th and or Pisces, there's this undoing by secret enemies. Since secret enemies do hang out in sixth house Virgo energy across the chart, you can actually have that, right? This idea of open enemies, but this is the thing. With this Saturn placement, the enemy could actually be you. It could be your own unconscious self, angry with you for having been brushed aside. Like you're angry with yourself. You're angry with yourself for allowing people to brush you aside, for allowing people to discredit you or discount you, for allowing people to not make you feel like you're enough, right? You could be angry at yourself for developing any sort of addiction. You could be angry at yourself for not going after the jobs that you really want. You could be very hard on yourself in this space. You really can. And this doesn't have to be like a forever kind of thing, but you could certainly struggle with this. Now, when you make friends with what you have here rejected, right, in the name of security, right, a sense of peace ends up settling over your psyche, right? So if you don't push down those parts of yourself that you've denied, push down parts of yourself that you really don't want to look at, then you're likely going to move into an energy focused on protecting yourself against any kind of, sounds very hyperbolic, but invasion, right? By really encompassing what it means to be within yourself, keeping to yourself, and you want to unpack this thing that you reject, because what can easily happen here, guys, I mean, not to cut myself off, but I just don't want to forget to tell you this, that you don't want to give yourself permission to forget your dreams. And Saturn here can often do it. Gives us this permission. Your dreams don't matter. It's okay. Because 12th house Pisces energy, it's where our dreams live. And we could easily give ourselves permission to do that. You don't want to do that here. There are deep psychological fears which are difficult to trace, which may really contribute to pervading sense of self-doubt and this lack of confidence. And sometimes your problem may stem from prenatal difficulties, because the 12th house is where we're in utero. Pisces energy is where we're in utero, right? And the womb is a place where we're meant to swim in a sense of the totality of life. That's what we're meant to do. But if for any reason that space experienced challenges, right, while your mom was pregnant, then we may later resist anything that resembles that kind of experience, right? Because we are very aware, even when we're in utero, something very important for all of us to understand. So it can be very worthwhile to investigate what that gestation period might have been like, right, for your mom. Perhaps your mother wasn't sure about having you at the time, or she could have been worried about money, or her relationship with your dad, or the father energy at that point. Whatever the situation was, you as a developing embryo through the umbilical connection could have registered that life is not all right, prompting you to grow up vaguely anxious about almost everything and guilty about being alive and feeling off in your ability to just sort of deal with and engage in the rest of life. Now, some of you with Saturn in this space are terrified of intimacy, obviously, right? Because of what we've spoken to up to this point. Now, this could stem from a fear of being engulfed, or, meaning like you lose who you are, right? And losing who you are is terrifying. Or you have a dread of losing whatever it is that you consider to be your own, whether it's your own individuality, your freedom, whatever it is. You may believe that you can only maintain autonomy by withdrawing from other people, or you fear that no matter what you do, everything has to come to an end, right? And because of that, you push away attachment or commitment to people or things, because there's this underlying sense of futility. It's like, why bother? Doesn't really matter, right? And that really needs to be brought up to the surface and explored. right? Because until you do this, you may fear the whole realm of emotions and feelings are just something that's going to ultimately end up being hurtful for you. So why even engage with it? So you don't want to do that. Keep in mind that any principle in 12th house or Pisces energy can sustain us, but it can also undo us. So you have to make the choice how you're going to engage in this energy. Because positive Saturn qualities, such as recognizing your natural limits, the acceptance of duty and responsibility, and just a lot of common sense, can help you get through difficult situations. I see this a lot, right? When it comes to the development of inner wisdom, this is where a lot of people can turn to spirituality, not negative things in order to get through things, but things that are a lot more positive. However, too great a sense of separateness from the rest of life, an overly materialistic outlook, or a refusal to really examine psychological problems could really be the ultimate cause of a lot of your pain and suffering that you go through in life. Now, sometimes there is a voluntary withdrawal from activity or, whether it's within a relationship, whether it's within responsibilities in life, whatever it is, it could be that, or a compelling need for privacy and seclusion, right? To recollect, right, the pieces of yourself which have been shattered, you feel, by some sort of encounter within life, can overcome everything else, right? This very strong desire to be alone, to be separate, to be away. You have to be careful there because you can end up as, I don't even want to say a hermit, but very isolated, because hermits are very wise and very self-reflective, and you may have a hard time being very self-reflective, where it just may be, I don't want to deal with people because people are scary. Emotions are scary. Everybody's just out to hurt people. And it could be that. And that's something that would need to be unpacked. Okay. Finally, Saturn here in either the 12th house and or Pisces energy asks that the whole realm of the unconscious be taken very seriously. So if you have this placement, you may be afraid to examine the depths of your unconscious, right? You may be afraid of being completely honest in therapy. You might go to therapy, but you might not be very open and honest about it, right? You know how many people are like that? Give yourself some grace and don't beat yourself up. Not for any of this, right? But, you don't want to push those things down, because in order to overcome your fears and your challenges in this space, you have to at some point get on the path of psychological self-investigation. And that's where your strength is going to be born out of. You will not only reconnect to the severed parts of yourself, but regain a loss of sense of connectedness and being able to relate with others, just within life. And a lot of you may have felt this from a very, very early age, because again, Chiron is developed very early in life, right? But you don't have to stay that way, right? So really unpacking. Again, this is part of the axis of psychology, really kind of engaging in self-exploration and why you feel held back, and looking at the past and looking how you've ended things in your life, whether you've ended them or how people have ended things with you, and really unpacking how that's impacted you and trying to identify where that fear arises from and really facing it in a very confrontational way. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful for you. Thanks for hanging with me. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so now it's time to move on to Uranus. Now, Uranus represents originality and unconventionality, and this could be both the unusual and the brilliant genius, or that willful rebel without a cause. It tells you the areas which you break with convention. The exception would be if you have this retrograde in your chart. Please check out the video I did on retrograde so you best understand. It doesn't mean that this energy is not accessible to you, but it just means that it's a little more difficult for you to tap into it. Now, Uranus energy also tells you where you're likely to become like very innovative, where you could experiment with things in a new and exciting way. Uranus represents the future, represents shocking surprises. It represents moving forward and our revolutionary energy in order to create change. So we just discussed Saturn, where there's a heavy weight, right? But the key, the Chiron trauma key, right? It's all about finding that Saturn, identifying where the weight is, and then looking at that Uranus house and placement, right? You have to see the house that it's in is also the sign, right? So you have to look at both. And that's going to be the strategy. Now, that's not going to be the place in your life where you're going to implement the strategy. That's going to come in the next video when it comes to the axis. So up to this point, we want to know the sign that our Chiron is in and the house placement. That was last week, right? Look for those. Now, then I want you to find your Saturn house placement and the sign that it's in, right? We just discussed that. Now I want you to look for your Uranus, the sign that your Uranus is in, as well as the house, okay? And we're going to start with Uranus in Aries and or Uranus in the first house. Okay, guys, so Uranus in the first house and or Aries, this is a very interesting energy here because this is very connected to new beginnings, tackling something on your path. What is the first house? The first house is your sense of self. As far as how you present yourself to the world. The first house is the version of you that people meet before they really get to know you. So it's very connected to like your physical appearance. It's very connected to the clothes you wear, or at least the presentation of those clothes. So Uranus in the first house, it could be something very unique about you. Maybe there's something unique about your voice, or there's something unique about the way in which you walk or you present yourself, or there's something unique about the clothing that you wear, or the makeup that you wear. But there's something very unique about the version of you that you present to the world. This is a very interesting placement as well, because it's Uranus is very connected to the idea of electricity, very connected to the idea of moving forward, right? Now Uranus is exalted here, so we like this energy. This is wonderful remember, Uranus is very connected to sudden turns of events, sudden surprises, the path that you're walking on, right? So anecdotally, I see this a lot where people reach a point in their life and they would do one of two things. Either they get very involved in some sort of technological arena, okay, very technological arena, or they change their career altogether. This is really common, and not being afraid to do that. Remember, we're talking about ultimately Chiron. Looking at where the weight of that Saturn energy is and utilizing the beauty and the energy of very electric and very revolutionary Uranus in order to break the chains. Right? We're going to talk about the axis, like the actual places in your life where you're going to be breaking the chains. But Uranus in the first house gives a lot of energy, a lot of gumption, a lot of fortitude to actually move forward. Now, Uranus, because it's about revolutionary change, you should expect that there's like a lot of upheaval at various parts of your life, where it's like suddenly you have to move from this place, or you're suddenly leaving a job, or something suddenly happens where you didn't see it coming, right? It could certainly be that. Uranus also brings this, because Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. Uranus also brings with it this idea of disconnect, right? Aquarius is very connected to this idea of cold disconnect, feel seemingly very aloof. So you could come off to people as, I'm not going to say cold, but disconnected. This idea of just being a little like, not with the group. Right? Even if you don't feel like that, and it can actually be really frustrating for you, depending on what are the placements you have, but that could be there. You could feel very different than other people in your arena, in your path. But guys, honestly, I say wherever your Aquarius is and wherever your Uranus is, love it, because it's where you are your most unique self. And it's where you have the ability to create significant change. So here with this Uranus energy, in either the first house and or Aries, I can tell you that the way of dealing with that very deep wound is by actually being a leader in your own life and not being afraid to actually conquer a fresh path and new perspective. That could be a little scary for you, but it's the very thing that you should be leaning toward. Okay, guys, so I hope that was helpful. See you next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so Uranus in the second house and or Taurus, you will have to approach the whole area of money, possessions, and resources in a very different way from the ordinary, right? This position represents a challenge to rise above the collective's traditional value system and the more usual ways of viewing the material world, not wanting to be bound by the need for material security and possessions. You might even push away and poo-poo the whole idea of attachment to the very things that most people are thinking, like, I don't need a lot of money. I don't need a house. I don't need, anything like that. If valued at all, money will be appreciated for the freedom it offers you to pursue what it is that you really want to do. But that's the relationship to money. You know what I mean? It's like, it's more of a means to an end rather than something, you just don't care so much about like keeping up with the Joneses. It's just, it's not a thing, right? And I'm just talking about this one placement. I don't know what else you might have speaking to this placement in your chart, but that is what this energy means here. Now, sometimes there may be unusual ways of earning money, or the income can be gained from something that's in a newly developing field. Especially modern technologies or some sort of highly individualistic endeavor, right? Like, maybe you're a creator, like on social media, or you're again involved in technology, or you have one of these jobs where it's like it's so niche, that nobody ever even heard of it, but it's like that's great with you. You may support a more radical economic or political system which organizes the distribution of wealth differently from the society in which you live. That could certainly manifest like that. Uranus in this space is also associated with sudden material and financial ups, but also downs. You got to be a little careful here. Intuitively, acting on a hunch, you may take risks with money, but it most often can leave you penniless. So I never love this placement to take huge risks. Like, err on the side of caution, go for the long game. If you're going to play around with anything like that, you want to make sure that you can afford to lose whatever it is that you're putting forth, okay? But in the same way, let's take money out of it for a second. This idea of, because second house is also your sense of self and your self-esteem, like wanting to throw yourself into something too quickly, right? Because Uranus is very quick, so we want to be careful here, right? We throw ourselves too quickly into something. If we, I see this a lot where it's just like impulse buying. A lot of impulse buying can get you into debt very easily. So just be mindful of that, right? It is likely that you often experience some sort of change, disruption, or deconstruction in the area of anything that you would consider necessary for your personal security. So for some of you, it might be money. For others of you, it might be your possessions, your home. For others of you, it might even be relationships that matter a lot to you. And that forces you to reevaluate that whole area of your life. So, for example, even if you're trying to pursue a more conventional approach to the material world, you could find yourself the victim of some larger collective influence or upheaval, which disrupts your source of income or security. Or the company you work for may do a reshuffle, or due to a recession, you find yourself on the list of the people who actually need to go or need to be let go of, or for reasons beyond your control. There's always a beyond your control thing here. You have to leave everything and start over someplace else. So at some time in your life, you may have to develop like a different set of skills, unlike those you previously used in order to support yourself and make a living. Or you may find that you have to find a new home because of the disruption of a relationship or your possessions. Right? Uranus, again, it's a revolutionary, it's a revolting. So it's about, something ending for there to be betterment, though, right? Because why do we have revolutions? The revolutions are meant to improve our status, right? But we have to be very careful with what we're choosing to move ourselves into with Uranus in this area. And the reason, again, remember, we're connecting it back to Chiron. Wherever your Chiron moon is, wherever your Saturn placement is, wherever that heavy weight is, you're going to want to go in and kind of like rip the Band-Aid off the wound. I'm going to take this chance financially. I'm going to take this chance with the relationship, thinking that it's the right thing to do. But actually with Uranus here, it's like, okay, pull it back, be your unique self. But in a way of troubleshooting, slow and steady is going to win the race, okay? Be careful of that, okay? A lot of times it's your own unconscious urges here, which ultimately coerce you to break with past attachments, with that job, with that relationship. And if you're unconscious of your deep need for freedom, because there's a lot of desire for freedom here, you may choose situations which you believe offers you security, but ultimately turn out to be, at the end of the day, unstable. And in any battle between conscious desires and unconscious ones, the unconscious always wins, not even sometimes. So just watch. Innate resources which should be developed are those of originality, inventiveness, being open to new. And when I say new, like new strategies, new approaches, new currents, like social currents, new progressive, trends. And they can offer very crystal clear insights into situations, meaning what you bring to the table, what you offer to situations can bring a whole new approach to things, which is great. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But you want to be careful because of where this arena is located, of being cautious when it comes to your money. Okay. Um, you just want to be careful there. Okay. It may be that also you can materialize your genius more easily than when this planet is in other houses, right? Because again, that Taurus second house energy, it's the money that you make from the work that you do, and this is the energy of genius, right? I mean, this is the placement of Michelangelo, who is often referred to as the universal genius. It's very there. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, very smart. There could be a changing, of environment, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it typically means like you want some sort of sense of freedom, but you just want to be careful of how that might impact your finances. Okay. Just be mindful of that. And then next time we're going to talk about the axis where you should be exercising this unique sense of self, right? Combining it with that Saturn energy in order to deal with that Chiron energy. I hope this was not too confusing. It's a big, unpacking Chiron is a big job, so we want to take it piecemeal. Hopefully this was helpful to better understand yourself. See you guys next time. Bye-bye. Okay, so those of you who have Uranus in Gemini and or the third house, you look for your own way to understand what happens around you rather than adhering to how you have been educated to see things, right? In other words, you're very inventive. You like to look at things a very different way, very original, very intuitive thinker. Your Uranian mind grasps concepts of the whole. Those without this placement struggle with this. I mean, you keep in mind, this is the way we think, right? Uranus is the sign of the genius. You can easily feel like people just do not get you, right? That Uranian mind goes and goes and goes, and you naturally have revelations and sudden insights into life, into people, events, and even into situations. And somehow you perceive the environment from a very different angle to others. Very often, you show and you exhibit a very specific type of detailed, very detached clarity, which enables you to solve problems quickly. While others are grappling with solutions and establishing maybe research projects or trying to figure things out in order to fully understand something. You show up and you immediately know the answer, or you're like, it's obvious. We have to do it this way, or this is the answer to this. What are you guys not seeing, right? And a more rational and logical mind will be baffled by your ability to pull the answers just basically out of the flipping air. And sometimes your ideas are slightly ahead of your time. So others will just not be able to understand you. And you'll immediately, and at times, you'll just be like, I don't even really understand myself. Some of the, you could easily be like, some of the stuff that comes into my head, I don't even get it. I could even scare myself a little bit. Where am I coming up with these things? Where it's like you could even feel that if you don't understand, because they will feel a little out of the box, out of the ordinary, But, days, months, years later, you're going to be like, oh, that's why I was thinking that. That's what happened, right? It's very connected to that kind of energy where it might not make sense in that very moment, but it starts to sort of rear its head. Now, you're likely to be very restless and high strung because, man, Uranus is very electric. And this is a house of movement. This is a sign of movement to begin with. So you need to move around, explore, experience a wide variety of life's different arenas, right? Your mind may change course so quickly that others are so confused by what is happening, right? You could totally want something one minute and then you just change your mind, and it could be very confusing. It's because there's a lot of mental gymnastics that happen with this placement. And it appears that you're changing the subject or talking in riddles when actually you have made a very quick connection between one topic and another, which slower thinkers may fail to perceive at the moment. Like you're making connections and you're making connections that other people maybe don't follow you as easily. I mean, this is just like one of the challenges of being so smart. Uranus's thinking is often non-linear. It's just non-lateral. We're a very lateral thinking society. So this could be very frustrating when you're dealing with others who are not as quick as you. Now, this placement can describe also a very disruptive early environment, possibly one in which significant changes in residence produced upheaval for you. Even at an early age, you may have felt very separate or different from others in the immediate environment, maybe in school or friends around the neighborhood, or even extended family members, your siblings for sure. The relationship with your siblings may even be unusual. Like say maybe you have a blended family where there are stepsisters or brothers from a previous marriage of one or both parents, anything like that. But you may have a hard time adjusting to traditional things, especially traditional educational systems. Any course of study may have been subject to some sort of like chopping and changing, right? Some sort of changing. So, a lot of times this placement can make a highly original contribution to any branch of learning. Again, I've seen this placement in, standout educators, standout people in the field of education, even business, actually, even business as well. But, going back, it's like this idea of traditional and, maybe you change schools a lot, or maybe you were in a very unconventional system, maybe there was homeschooling or some sort of non-traditional, or just the way that you experienced school was very non-traditional. You just didn't feel like you fit in with like the learning methods. It doesn't mean you didn't learn, very smart, but it might have been just a very different experience for you. All right. So very important to understand as far as strategy comes, this idea of embracing originality in the realm of thinking and the way of communicating as a way, right, through, third house energies, siblings, extended family, and where you are uniquely different as a way of helping to heal that Chiron wound, right? We'll understand it more by the next video when we're going to talk about the axis. But again, just for now, understanding your Chiron sign and house placement, your Saturn sign and house placement, and now your Uranus sign and house placement. Okay, guys, I'll see you next time. So Uranus in the fourth house and or Cancer. This part of the video is for you. So guys, whether through personal choice or unavoidable external circumstances, you are not meant to be bound by the traditional family unit. This is just going to be very, very important for you to understand and work through that Chiron wound. You may feel like an outsider, a stranger, or an outcast from your families of origin, or for some reason, your early life was disrupted and the family was scattered. This placement, a lot of times with Uranus here, implies a need to find where you truly belong as your family or your racial roots don't seem to provide the kind of containment and contentment and security that it is that you feel like you need on a soul level. So this can show up because it's Uranus, often deeply restless. You require the space and freedom to search for your own true spiritual home and or family, right? So a lot of times with this placement, I see people kind of, they say we can't choose our family in this lifetime, right? We choose it before we come in here for the lessons we need to learn, but where you can become really good friends with people and then they can become your family. But the thing is here, fearing the loss of alternatives, you are sometimes reluctant to put down roots anywhere at all, right? Because you don't want to put your roots down and then have to move again. Because that Uranus in the fourth, a lot of upheaval early in life. There was something about the home environment that just was not stable. It doesn't mean that it wasn't filled with love, but there was something that was not stable, right? And you could always just kind of feel this, right? You can be very reluctant, right? Maybe there is someplace better for you to live, or there's someplace more appropriate for you to live across town, or I don't want to totally commit myself to this or that because maybe someplace will be better. In certain circumstances, I've seen this disruption has been attracted externally, as if by fate, like something from the outside compels a move or a need to uproot, or everything seems perfectly secure at home until Uranus in the fourth end or Cancer is triggered by a progression or a transit, and suddenly out of the blue, you have to pick up and leave, or the family breaks up or changes in some way, right? But there's some sort of like disruptive energy there. This placement could also be described as, again, a very unusual, I said before, like, not very consistent, right? But just some sort of unusual home life. Maybe your father or a hidden parent may bear some of the Uranian characteristics, may have been unconventional or erratic in some way, literally like appearing and then disappearing from the home scene, or just had some sort of like unique thing going on. He might have felt, he or she may have felt trapped by being a parent, could have been there physically, not mentally, not emotionally, right? I mean, it's that kind of energy, right? But it's understanding that it's very important for you to find an identity which is based on something other than just the personal family unit in your life. So it doesn't only have to be friends, but it can be a combination of friends, things that you love to do for yourself. It could be through your work, just not looking for that inner base of security and operation specifically through only the family unit. Again, it could be through just your own created family unit as well. But I wouldn't be surprised though if when you do create your own family unit, you start to get a little restless under the collar when you're there. Perfectly natural with this particular placement, right? But this is something that this is a strategy to adopt when it comes to dealing with your Chiron return, where it's like, okay, that idea of that, move into a home and live there for 25 years and then move out and have that, run-of-the-mill stuff. It's like, it's just not meant for you. And so what? It's awesome. You know, and really we have to lean into it, because whatever our Uranus energy is, it's like, no, well, listen, this is the way I'm doing home life. This is the way I'm doing family life. Because a lot of you will feel far more safe and far more secure doing your own jam when it comes to home and family and having that inner base of operation. So hopefully this made sense for you guys. Thanks for hanging with me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Hi guys, so if you have Uranus in the fifth house or the sign of Leo, this part of the video is for you. Okay, so you've gotten your Chiron house placement and sign, Saturn house placement and sign, and here let's talk about Uranus. So rather than relying on conventional or traditional modes of self-expression, with this placement here, you should let your individuality shine. Just shine through in whatever you do, right? Doesn't have to be in an egocentric way where this is me, like me or not, you're going to be, ew in that way. You don't want to do that. But you have to allow your energy to shine here. It may be challenging for you to ever feel completely satisfied, wholly so, with anything that you create, always thinking that you could have done better, you could have created better, something a little more ideal. Creative inspirations can come in a flash with Uranus here. That is really nice, like a bolt of like this amazing concept, right? Just apps comes out of absolutely nowhere, which could be great. But you have to like call out this idea that you could always feel like better. Now, keep in mind, what is fifth house? It's our children. It's our monetizable talent. So it's our art. It's our poetry. It's our entrepreneurial efforts. It's our joy, right? And so what can happen here is we can build things up in our head, and then when those things that we build up in our head don't manifest in the 3D, we can feel a little disappointed here. We have to call that out. We really do have to call that out and unpack it and understand that that is very connected to our Chiron energy. Now, later in life, those of you with this placement are more interested in really truly what other people might find a little like weird, a little eccentric, and you may pursue hobbies or entrepreneurial endeavors which are out of the ordinary. The same goes for love affairs and romances, which may be unconventional, and with sudden beginnings and endings, right? This is what Uranus brings. You can become bored when the initial excitement and the enthusiasm goes away, right? Like that honeymoon period, it's like, womp womp, now what, or if the affair becomes too known or it becomes constricting or anything like that, you can just be a little out of the box, a little out of the ordinary when it comes to these things. And at that point, justifications are sought for some sort of abrupt finish, right? Where you will do what you need to do to rationalize why this thing needs to end or why this thing needs to be different, right? It's very, very interesting placement here, right? But again, remember, this is where you're unique. You're out of the box. Leo fifth house energy is very connected to your childhood. This is really where you have to get in touch with that early child within you that might have been hushed, that might have been too scared to explore, that might have been struggling with analysis paralysis or imposter syndrome, whatever it is, doing it that way. Now, most people can create on the ordinary biological level by producing children, right? But you may need to find other ways than purely biological to express yourself, right? So, chances are you're not the person who's like, once I have children, I'm going to feel fulfilled. I mean, a lot of people are like, having children isn't going to fulfill me in every way, but without them, I'm going to feel like I didn't fulfill everything that I wanted to fulfill. With a lot of people, it's super common, right? You may not really deal with that. And even if you do have children, your creative needs won't be totally satisfied by just being a parent. I mean, as big as that job is on a soul level, Uranus is very big in this space. You're going to feel like you want more. If you cling too closely, right, to your children, or you try to turn them into individuals to live out your unused potential, those children will likely react by breaking away from home as soon as possible. You really want to be a little mindful of that. This placement can indicate very progressive views on parenting or contrary ways of parenting. You could also get into a very out of the box, unique type of business. You may have a very unique or out of the box gift, monetizable talent, right? I always think about, whenever I think about Uranus in this space, I always think about like, America's Got Talent, some of the crazy talented ways these things that people present on America's Got Talent. I think they have it in every country, actually. But I always think, oh, Uranus in the Feb. It's like what an out of the box kind of thing, right? But again, Uranus is the strategy. Now, as far as the solutions and the axis having to do with dealing with our Chiron, Uranus is about the strategy. So here it's like being unapologetically yourself, right? And being able to embrace the different, not feeling like you have to, pigeonhole yourself into any one arena, understanding that on a soul level, in order to be happy, there's got to be a level of expansiveness, and it may not end. It just may not be satisfied having, if you're in a relationship or even if you have children, you do want to be very, again, very mindful though of not projecting your self onto your children. You want to be careful of that, okay? Just something to be mindful of. Now, you may also find that if you do have children with Uranus in the fifth house and or Leo, that your oldest child has something very unique or out of the ordinary about them as well, right? So something to just, keep in mind there. Okay, guys, so hopefully that was helpful. Until the next video, you guys take care now. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, so for you, Uranus in either the sixth house or the sign of Virgo, let's unpack this. You are meant to explore in a deeper way the intimate relationships between the inner world of the mind and feelings of the outer world and the body. Remember, Uranus is very electric, right? So there is this connection that exists between what's inside of you and the kind of everyday reality that you create for yourself, right? So there's a lot of mind-body connection going on here with this placement. You have a chance to learn that in order to change the outside, the inside needs to be addressed first. So any problems which you face daily in your life, or even in your physical body, need to be met with questions like, okay, what are the patterns that are going on here? What patterns in me produce these difficulties? How can I change them? Self-examination, right? There's a lot of self-examination needs to go on here based on very unique and liberating ideas that you create, and that and this idea that you're responsible for your own reality. I mean, that is the key to having a positive experience with this placement. You are responsible for your own reality. Otherwise, with this placement here, you can be prone to, at times, minor, this is a lifelong placement, minor, sometimes major upheavals in your life, such as becoming sick in order to avoid going to a job that you don't like, getting sick in order to avoid dealing with school or responsibilities, rather than admitting first that you're feeling very trapped by that said thing, whether it's work or responsibilities, whatever it is. And you could start to get sick because you don't want to deal with that version of reality that you've created for yourself. Now, think about it. Sixth house is our daily responsibilities and it's our daily experience. So within that relationship, within that job, having to do with our health, having to do with, and I know this sounds very basic, but it's like, this is such a placement for people who are like, I can't have a cat because I'm allergic to cats. They could even just make it up. But even to the point where, and it's not that they don't think the cats are adorable, right? Or even puppies are adorable or anything like that. Just don't want to be boxed in, don't want the responsibility. You'd say, I'm allergic or have, but to the point where when you are around that animal, you can actually manifest symptoms, even if it's not real. And I know that sounds very sort of like random and specific, but I've seen this enough for me to find it worthy to mention, right? But the sixth house, really think about your daily experience, your daily job, your daily responsibilities, your daily health. Now, in fact, with this particular placement, the whole area of work or employment can be approached in a very unconventional way, rarely suited to the repetitive 9 to 5. That would be like needles in your eyes. 9 to 5 are like, you can find it really difficult to stay in a job purely out of sense of like duty or just to like pay the bills. Your mind needs to be continually engaged and interested in sort of like, there have to be hurdles overcome. Like you want to have some sort of tests, some sort of challenges, you know. you like that. You like that change. You like variety, inventiveness, movement, always doing something different. Often there can be difficulty working under others because you need to approach your job in your own way. Even if it has never been done in that way previously, you're going to try to do it. That's what I love about this placement, actually, because if you don't have any, and I don't know you personally, but if you don't have any like bad aspects, which nothing's good or bad really in astrology, but challenging aspects to it, exchanging ideas with coworkers in the workplace, coming up with very inventive ways of dealing with responsibilities is something that you can um, really kind of bring to the table. I mean, in that way, you have your own way of doing things. Now, a lot of times this placement is interested in new technologies as well as subjects like astrology or other related metaphysical or psychological systems. Anything which gives a frame of reference from which you can observe and meet life, right? It's that idea of frame of reference, right? You can really resonate with any sort of think tank situation. You know, think tanks can apply to absolutely any arena, any area, but when it comes to like sitting down and really shooting ideas, coming up with different ways of approaching things, that is really in your wheelhouse. Where it can get a little tricky is if you're working for other people and they don't appreciate your the genius in this area because they maybe find that you're trying to get their position, or you're trying too hard, or maybe they could perceive you as being very contrary to the way that the environment within that workplace is expected to go. Why? Because you're bringing your genius in and you really don't want it to be suffocated. So you can say something or silently suffer where you feel like you're being held back, right? So it's something that you need to keep in mind. Now, you don't like to be bound by everyday little necessities and routines. And you can even create upheavals in your life to make your life more interesting and exciting. Again, life might become easier for you if you consciously acknowledge what you don't like and then do something to change that area rather than subtly provoking external forces to disrupt it for yourself, right? Like, I'm going to give you a very simple example. Like, everyday responsibilities are probably not your jam, right? Like having to like clean the floor, put the dishes away, do the cleaning, cooking, whatever it is. You may find one or two things that you really like to do in all of that, but the other things, it's just like for whatever reason, it's such a drag. You can't bring yourself to do it. Call that out and figure out a different strategy. Talk to the people that you live with and see if there can't be some sort of disbursement of responsibilities, or just really psych yourself up and figure out a way of being to embrace it. But what you don't want to do is put yourself down and say, I'm just not good with responsibilities. I just can't find anywhere where I can relate with anybody I like to work with. I just, either it's them or it's just me or it's just life. That's like, no, it's a little bit of everything. It's the way you are, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to work within your realm. Now, something has gone on with your Chiron energy where you do not want to be boxed in to the daily routine of something because maybe there was like too much structure in another part of your life, or the expectations were too high, or they were just too rigid, and you want to break away from that. You understand? That's where that Uranus comes in as our strategy. It's not so much the axis of solution. Again, we're going to be getting to that in the next video. But the strategy here is embrace that unique energy when it comes to how it is that you face life. Okay. What I find interesting about this placement as well, in the relationship between mind and body, you might explore various forms of alternative or even complementary medicine, sometimes experimenting with unusual ways of eating, with different ways of working out. Now, your health problems can stem from too much stress with this energy. Remember, this is like wild electricity in the house of the health. So nervous tension, that can absolutely weaken the body's defenses here. And remember, Uranus rules Aquarius, which does rule like autoimmune. So we want to be a little careful here because an overly inhibited sixth house or Virgo energy can create illness linked with autoimmune, allergies, And these things typically manifest due to unexpressed anger and resentment. And suggest that people who, if you got to know yourself, right? Do you have a very short fuse, because people with a very short fuse, there's a lot of research to support this, are very prone to allergic conditions, right? Now, obviously, with Uranus here, you're going to benefit from any form of activity, which is going to help you unwind and get all of that energy out. So physical exercises, you can do yoga, meditation, whatever it is. Now, Uranus here on a positive side does offer a real possibility of a speedy recovery or release of something from an illness, but it manifests really from your mental attitude. So you have to be right here, and then everything will benefit here, right? Really being able to get in front of that stress, getting in front of the anxiety, putting everything in perspective. And this is happens to be a placement, a couple of placements which I often will recommend if you want to do additional work on yourself and you're just not into going to therapy or you don't have the time, taking out books on cognitive behavioral therapy is very, very effective if you have your Uranus in this placement. It really helps you to deal with things in the moment that they arise, not to harbor these things, not to hold on to them, because you don't want to hold on to anything because of how easily, just naturally and energetically, it can manifest in your body a little more than the next person. Okay, guys, so I hope that was helpful. Remember that Saturn energy that we talked about, that's where the weight is, and Uranus is very connected to strategy. And we'll talk more about it next time. Bye-bye. Hi guys, so if you have Uranus in the sign of Libra or Uranus in the seventh house, let's talk about it. This part's for you. Your attitude towards relationship, the whole idea of relationship, it could be with a significant other, could we be with business partners, whatever it is, it needs to extend beyond the conventional framework with Uranus here. Again, because Uranus is about out of the box, out of the ordinary. Now, while many of you may remain in a relationship because of a need for safety and security, or out of even a sense of duty, most of you will find it really hard to endure. And again, it depends on what else you have in your chart, but you're going to find it really difficult to endure a lifeless or outworn partnership. Just for those reasons, like just because out of duty or whatever. Like if a relationship is not creative, if it's not exhilarating and honest, you may disrupt it just for the sake of finding something better. It's very difficult for you because then you're just going to be always like looking around. You can't help it. You have Uranus in there. There's so much electricity. So you and your partner might require more space and freedom than found in the typical marriage or close reunion. Rather than simply being categorized as somebody's partner, you need other interests outside the relationship from which you gain your sense of identity and your sense of vitality. So, and it can really be difficult for you. Now, on the one hand, you don't want to deal with any sort of messy cheating energies, right? But at the same time, you don't want anybody up in your grill constantly either. You need a little bit of freedom. You need that, right? And if you are not the prime mover in acting out the urges of this Uranian energy here, you can easily attract or select a partner who perpetuates this for you. So if you don't acknowledge your restlessness or your need for less conventional structure, then you might provoke another person to somehow alter the state of affairs here, right? Where you're coming into some sort of unconventional thing. So unconventional relationships could show up as like secret love affairs or somebody who, is never going to give you, right? Where you might not even be cognizant of your need for freedom within a relationship because of other placements in your chart. You may not really be fully cognizant and, in your conscious mind, but then you can attract people who maybe have what you would call commitment issues. And you might even complain about it, but yet there's a safety in it because then that will always give you that bit of sense of freedom that you want. Right? So it could come in either way, right? It depends on other things in your chart, right? If that makes sense. But the general rule here is with Uranus in any house, is that the more we acknowledge its presence there and internalize its nature, the less likely we're going to have Uranus's manifestation put upon us, or any sort of upheaval that he necessitates put upon us by external forces. So it's really important to understand, like for you guys, you can experience this it's best for you to be in like an unconventional, a very not a very traditional relationship, not very traditional, even what you do for work, right? Because the seventh house Libra energy is also very connected to our energetic output at work, was very connected to our boss or our bosses, you know. So maybe there's something a little unconventional, right? And it's not that you don't yearn for intimacy. In fact, one side of you yearns for intimacy and safety in relationship, even though you want this freedom and you want this out of the box, right? It's you want it, right? But this other part of you is frightened of losing your separate individuality or being too confined by the partnership. And a possible resolution is finding a partner with the same conflicts, right? Keeping an awareness of the dilemma in the open and structuring your relationship accordingly. And a lot of people, that's like too revolutionary for some people to do. It's like, I can't do that. That might not go well, or I might be embarrassed. Again, it depends on what other placements you have, right? An atmosphere in which both of you can freely exchange and discuss your feelings and your moods without the other one taking it too personally in order to facilitate a healthy relationship, it is where you're going to be the happiest with relationships. So you will need to recognize that each of you are individuals within your own rights and not people who exist solely and completely and only to fulfill whatever that partner wants or needs in that particular moment or that particular point in life. I mean, obviously, you guys have to be mature. Obviously, there's got to be fairness here. Exercise is going to be, obviously is going to be needed in order to accomplish this. Your best relationships, though, usually come when you are older and you are wiser about yourself and life in general. And that makes sense because it takes a while for us to go through relationships of different versions to figure out what it is that we need. And it's right because traditional relationships in society, there is more of an understanding that we should be more enmeshed than not, where it's more revolutionary and non-traditional for people to have their own separate friend group or separate whatever, right? That's just not really traditional. It's really not traditional. But it might take going through those traditional relationships a few times before you realize, you know what? This ain't really working for me. I need a little bit more space, right? And that's okay, and that's okay. So a lot of you with Uranus here, you can also experience sudden changes in your outlook and attitude when it comes to thinking about past relationships and how it is that you've done relationships up to a certain point. Because at the end of the day, when you're really true to yourself, you seek highly original, spirited, dynamic, inventive, magical, really unique partners. Okay. Someone who wakes you up and offers you change to new things in life, to new landscapes to experience and explore, right? However, right, a person of that nature is not likely to be the kind to bring a great degree of stability and security to a relationship. So that's ultimately where you're going to have to navigate. And I don't want to confuse you, but this is where I say, really know where your Juno is as well. Did I do a video on Juno? I think I did. I have to see if it's still up. But yeah, because you don't want somebody who's, again, really up your back constantly. You really don't want that. Always, where you have no space, but you really don't want to deal with somebody who's just like, somebody with consistent wanderlust and they're out there, whatever. There's got to be some sort of balance, Now, right. And so that's the thing, right? Can you find that non-traditional, non-conventional? And why is it that you need this non-traditional, non-conventional? Well, I don't know. We have to ask you Chiron because it's all about Chiron. And where is the weight of Saturn? Because this is about strategy. Your Uranus energy, recognizing in relationships, you need to have some freedom because it's important that you have a clear sense of self and that you don't go along with the status quo of everything. Our society places so much pressure on people to marry and people to have certain jobs to such a degree that those who don't marry or those who don't do certain types of jobs, or you know what I mean? Like if you're not in that kind of thing, there's something like wrong or off about you, right? So those leading with like a single or divorced lifestyle may need to remind themselves that they, are worthwhile, that you do matter, that even if you're divorced or you're not married in the first place, whether you're in a relationship or not, you have value. Whether you're in a traditional type of career situation, you have value. You know, Libra also refers to like social interactions in general, and the principle of Uranus will apply here, possibly indicating that, you're meant to bring new ideas and new insights and new breakthroughs to society in general by virtue, again, of your work, of who it is that you are. And because Libra energy, what is the glyph? It's the scales, right? So, you could bring some new insights when it comes to like what's fair and what's not. So connecting it back to your Chiron wounds, really looking at your Chiron wounds, and is it born into something or rooted in something where there was a lot of like unfair behavior, something like that, where your strategy of getting past that is actually to be an advocate for more fairness and balance in relationship, but also individuality, because you may have experienced, people who you love sort of get, for lack of a better term, sort of like swallowed up in life circumstance of maybe a parental relationship, the marriage, or a family situation, or, an illness or something like that, right? And so it's very important for you, in order to really succeed in relationship, for you to have a balance, right, within yourself as well as other relationships. And that's a really good way of being able to strategize in healing your Chiron. And we'll talk about the parts of your life that it's going to show the most clearly when we go into the axis in the next video. But to understand this is the next level of understanding like our deepest wounds as well as the area of our greatest strength. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys next time. Uranus in the eighth house or Uranus in the sign of Scorpio, this part is for you. Now, Uranus here engenders those kinds of emotions and feelings so often awakened by the agony and the absolute joy and even the ecstasy of love passions like envy and lust and jealousy and rage and this idea of possessiveness and vindictiveness, right? Uranus seeks to approach this area differently than the way most people do. A lot of times people with this placement have a very compelling urge to just free themselves from the restrictions of the basic instinctual nature, or to overcome being ruled by those very emotions. So you may continually expose yourself to situations which challenge you to rise above and develop detachment from those primal instincts in order to create a broader and more tolerant understanding of such, the outcome that those messy feelings can often manifest, for instance, like the concept of a communal marriage, or even, husband and wife swapping, partner swapping. In some cases, you may try this sort of liberal approach, all right, to relationship and connectedness, but fail at it ultimately. So it's like the desire to try something different and try something new, right? But with something like that, you're going to be failing at it. It's not going to be for you. You might give it a go. You might try and be like, no, Now, in the same way, you may seek to express your instinctual nature in other ways than merely for the purpose of intimacy, for creating children, or just for, mating, procreation reasons, right? The reputation of this placement is known to some degree to be sexually curious and open to experimentation. You may even look for techniques and systems which enable you to transcend the realm of desire through redirecting your sex drive into other outlets. I've had several clients like that where they've just completely shut down that whole part of themselves, and they just redirect those outlets into other areas. Now, other people, they have very unique, because remember, it's unique and out of the box, and this is the place that rules sex and intimacy. So, for a lot of us, it would be like this place where, we're just attracted to things that are out of the box, out of the ordinary, in that realm of our life. Now, I've also seen this placement alternate between the extremes of excessive passion and inhumane coldness, where it's like you could just shut yourself down. For instance, this is a kind of energy where a person believing absolutely in a certain cause may not think twice about, and I know this sounds really bananas, but like planting like some sort of explosive device, like in some sort of place, right? If it would promote their mission, right? Sounds very dramatic, but you get the idea. And I'm only using that as an example, not to give anybody, any sort of great ideas. But you see, it's like feeling justified to sort of eradicate something because it goes against a certain belief system. Now, it's likely that you often have a desire to probe beneath the surface of existence and to discover the more subtle laws of nature that are going on in life. Like, what's the meaning of life? What is the deal with the cycles of life, right? Which is why, like, astrology and psychology and alchemy and anything, let me just grab some water. Anything to do with the occult can be very fascinating. Even anything having to do with science, like anything having to do with physics, anything like, like subatomic physics as well, really anything that's like underneath the thing, modern chemistry, anything like that, can really interest you. You might even be very fascinated by what death is all about. And not in a creepy way, but just really trying to understand and just attempt to understand in a less conventional framework, what is it all about and what actually happens to us at that point. Now, psychic and telepathic experiences are likely not foreign to you, although you may not have too much control over them when they occur. You may not understand it when it does happen. You gotta be careful here, guys. So if you're resonating with this, you have to be very careful who you share your energy with. If you wish to develop any abilities in this area, whether it's through astrology, tarot, Reiki, meditation, be very mindful of the energies that you engage with. Individuals who practice black magic or the darker side of the occult sciences are not a good fit for you. That is definitely not a good area for you. You will be opening yourself up to a lot of bad, dark bullshit, right? And you don't want to do that. So deal only with energies, practices, practitioners, authors, workshops, anything like that that they focus on light work, in a way to enhance and enrich, okay? Now, on a more mundane level, sudden reversals of fortune can come through marriage, inheritance, business partnerships, also phases of life may end suddenly and irreversibly, like you didn't see that divorce coming, you didn't see, it's the house in the area of life and death. You didn't see that person passing, seemingly overnight, right? One chapter finishes and another begins, or an unforeseen some sort of drastic event alters the direction in which you're heading, right? Very, very often we see this manifesting is that. One last thing I want to note here, though, is that because Uranus is very out of the box, very different, right? Scorpio into the eighth house. It's where we hold things, especially things in past life, things that we've never really healed, things that can create a lot of anxiety. Things that are very kind of like repressed in our energy can certainly manifest here. And with Uranus here, you can have a very sort of unique and out of the box way of dealing through these situations. So I find people with their Uranus in the eighth house gained so much benefit than we were just talking about, like the more positive realm of the occult and spirituality, really benefit with the mix of psychology, okay, in there, right, which would be evolutionary psychology, evolutionary astrology, but that would be like shoes that would fit you quite nicely. Okay, my friends, so that is what I have for you. Until next time, take care. Hi guys. Okay, so those of you who have Uranus in the ninth house and or in the sign of Sagittarius, this is one that's very much about truth. I mean, think about it. Uranus hanging out in the house and in the sign that Jupiter rules. Always searching. Uranus is always searching for the truth. And what better place to do it than in the house in the sign of truth, right? Just that natural energy again of not only Jupiter but also Sagittarius. So rather than adhering to traditional or orthodox views, you must independently find a meaningful set of beliefs and or philosophical systems by which you live your life. So again, Uranus is very out of the box, and ninth house has to do with traditions having to do with religion, law, legalities, local governance. We want to be careful here because Uranus in the ninth, depending on other placements, it could bring like a sudden arrest, a sudden incarceration, a sudden turning against the law. We want to be careful of that, but it could also bring this like really unique perspectives on spirituality, really unique perspectives on how things should roll out. Like I have my Uranus in the ninth house, and I have a very different perspective. And I'm only saying it based on the world in which I live, meaning, my environment, right? I mean, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I've been probably most of the modern religions at some point where I would give it a few years of a go. And all the time doing astrology, which is so against what people tell me I should be doing. But, as I've shared very often on my channel, I believe that the sky is God's workshop. And I stand by that. I've believed this since I'm 9 years old, almost 50 years. And yeah, no one's going to tell me any different. It's just the way it is. Do I believe in God? Absolutely. Practicing. I've studied the Bible. I'm all about it. I get it. It's so full of beautiful metaphors and beautiful answers. And I don't think that God is this big, scary thing. And I have my own perspective. It's very beautiful. It's very positive. And I think that He gave us the stars and the sky to help us. He gave us tools to live our life in a very practical way while we're here, in this lifetime. And that's what I think. That's very Uranus in the ninth. I'd be hard pressed to ever find anybody. When I sit down and I explain the in-depth to people, they get it. They're like, yeah, but that's after knowing that everybody thinks like, okay, you know what I mean? So again, what I would say, know that Uranus placement and love it energy, and love it anyway. You have to come up with your own belief system, not only saying religion, your own belief system, your own way of doing a higher education, your own way of growing yourself. You might come up with strokes of genius to write certain books, right? Because that Sagittarius ninth house energy has to do with publishing, marketing, editing, um, launching, getting something out there. You may have a very unique gift when it comes to the ability to negotiate things. It's actually a very beautiful placement if it's finely tuned, right? The thing is here, and this is very, very common, right? The image of God and the image of what's right. Not like what's right and wrong, the basic right and wrong, but the image of like the idea of what's right for you, for your life, may be very Uranian, right? Where it's very vast and it's very difficult to grasp. It could feel almost nebulous, right? Until you sit down and you clearly delineate, and yet, just as there are laws, again, which move the planets and the stars somewhere in it all, that there is a system. And this is the system that, you need to embrace. Occasionally, you might have flashes or insights into what you believe are the workings of the divine or the universal mind. And that's very real. And that's the very thing that you need to be, again, strategy leaning into in order to heal that Chiron wound. Sagittarius energy also represents the manifestation of father energy, right? So Uranus, something very out of us. So there could have been something very out of the box about your father, or there could have been a sudden reversal in your relationship with your father at some point in your life. Or there could have even been a point where you suddenly started to see your father or father energy very differently. Okay. So those are the different ways that it could manifest there. Again, this is strategy. The weight of that Chiron moon does show up through Saturn. So until next time, where we're going to talk about the axis in your life that you need to focus these strategies to unpack the weight. Until next time, thanks for joining me. Take care now. Bye-bye. So Uranus in the 10th house and or Uranus in Capricorn. Those of you with this placement, you need to contribute something original to progress society. You don't want to be seen as ordinary, run of the mill, right? But rather some sort of force for change, some sort of force for rebellion, and an innovator, right? Because this is Capricorn's natural domain, there is the ability to channel your new ideas or insights in a very concrete way. It's likely that you hold pretty fairly liberal views or even radical political views. Like Karl Marx had this placement, so did Michelangelo, just to name a couple. I've known a lot of people with this placement who have resigned from their jobs because they didn't agree with how things were being run. Others I've worked with are constantly changing their work in search for something a lot more meaningful to do. Like Uranus in mythology, you can easily destroy your creations and start again. So sometimes some of you with this placement, you could have unusual jobs or wake up one morning with a revelation which renders your present work obsolete. It's like, why am I doing this? This is going out. I don't want to do this anymore. Or it's being rendered obsolete, where suddenly you realize that you need to level up your skill set in order to be relevant. Sometimes events seemingly out of control will disrupt the status quo within your career. Now, if this placement has not acknowledged its restlessness, and we say this with Uranus, we have to acknowledge our restlessness wherever it hangs out, because we do have restlessness. If you don't acknowledge that the need for change in that area, then you can in some way provoke the change to happen by outside sources, right? So that's for some of you. Others of you will simply fall prey to collective trends which shatter or alter your course of direction, such as being let go because the company decided to go in like another direction, or someone bought out the company, so there are different people, running the company, or because your skills don't apply as much, at that point, right? So that's one way it could happen. Now, your mother may be cast in a very Uranian light as well, right? Because that 10th house Capricorn energy is the manifestation of mother energy. So she might be viewed as eccentric or unconventional in some way. She might have had some sort of outside interests which interfered with the mothering role, or she may have felt trapped as a parent. You could have sensed a degree of restlessness in her, as if she really wanted to be somewhere else rather than where she was most of the time. If you experienced her as being erratic, then you may have been forced to develop more independently, not being able to rely on her as much as maybe your friends relied on their moms. Now, at first, you might resent this, but then you later reflect, thankfully, that you had the chance to grow more freely and learn how to meet the world on your own. More often than not, that is how this manifests. And sometimes your mother may seemed conventional on the outside, but underneath you knew she was bursting with the strong desire to be her own person, be her own woman, and get out and do something very different. Right? You would sense this, right? And then later live out the mother's unfulfilled wishes. You understand? So it's like, because of that, because of what it is that you sense, you go on to fulfill the unfulfilled wishes of mother, right? And you likely often carefully avoid getting hemmed in by too much maternal or family responsibility. It's just not really your jam. Like sometimes Uranian mothers can feel very guilty about their lack of typical maternal instincts, forgetting their good traits, right? Where maybe you're very loving without being smothering, right? Or, you mirror and represent free thinking for your child. You might be happier raising children after you had satisfied something that you needed to contribute to society, right? So that's why, some people it's better to have like that earlier career and maybe have children a little later or, something like that, right? But these are the different ways that it can manifest. And then, of course, finally, because we're talking about 10th house Capricorn energy, which also speaks to our long-term goals and I guess status of our marriage and our status in life, there could be a quick reversal of our status in life, where it's like suddenly we find ourselves divorced, or suddenly we find ourselves on a path going in a different direction. This is very radiant, and so we need to just sort of understand that that's part of the strategy that we're meant to embrace in order to deal with that deep wound, not fight it, but embrace it. Right? This is where we need to embrace. Okay, guys, so hopefully that was helpful. I'll see you guys next time when we talk about the axes, which is good, which are going to be the location in our chart, the areas in our chart that we need to focus the strategy of Uranus and the weight of Saturn. We have to sort of blend them together and work through very pragmatically in order to heal that deep inner wound so that we can become the best version of ourselves. Okay, guys, see you next time. Bye-bye. So those of you who have Uranus in the 11th house and or Aquarius, this part of the video is for you. Very powerful here, obviously, because this is where Uranus lives. It's very powerfully placed when it's in its own home. Uranus here can expand the concept of being part of a group to its broadest dimension. Your main task is a far-reaching one, to widen your individual identity to everyone. You want everyone to know who you are. Now, this goal may never be realized completely, but it's liberating really for you to strive to accomplish it. So remember, the 11th house Aquarius energy has to do with the masses, right? And also Uranus does rule technology, is very exalted in this arena, right? Because it's all about technology. Addressing the masses through technology, very good strategy for you. There's no question about that. And even if you don't reach everybody, just getting out to the masses, because you're naturally capable of feeling a sense of kinship with the whole human race, rather than just seeing the world as a bunch of people and nations attacking and accusing one another. You do have the ability to view the whole planet as one big family, suggesting that there can be strategy implemented towards bettering us, right? For sure. Kind of like the same way as we struggle within our own personal families, you can sort of have that same kind of mindset about the world. And, because families struggle to resolve their problems and their conflicts. And so it's like you take that perspective and you sort of apply it to the world. The difference in these two things are subtle but very profound, right? This idea of dealing with our own private family and feeling with the family as our earth family, right? As a whole. I mean, that sounds so alien to actually say it like that, but it's very important to understand that you can feel other people in a very real way, but you can also feel ideas to be such a trailblazer when it comes to being able to help and serve the the masses rather. Now, those of you with Uranus here really should seek any group that you feel like you connect to, that can link you into a pursuit for an ultimate common goal. So something that would ultimately serve the masses. So generally here, we commonly refer to this place as where we form friends, right? With neighbors or people that we need at work, meet at work. But you feel more connected to those who share your similar vision. For you guys, it's very connected to the mind and the vision. You don't have to be geographically close to each other to be part of a group. What's important is that you're dedicated to the same ideals and objectives. So someone once said that that the group is the self of the altruist, and this may really be very true for you, right, with Uranus in this space. A lot of people with Uranus here won't even begin to see it this way. Nonetheless, such possibilities do exist for this placement, right? I mean, it's really it's a very wide placement. It's very interesting for me to think about because connecting it back to Chiron, which is that wound, what is part of the strategy and part of the anecdote for the solution there is other people. To other people, it's reaching out. But it's not just it's reaching out to like-minded people, whether it's a group of scientists or astrologers. You may serve some sort of Uranian function within any group, presenting challenging and radical ideas, playing the devil's advocate, or sparring with other members to make some debate more lively. You may also fall out with members of the same group over a matter of principle. You know, like it's very similar to having Mars in the 11th on one level, like different elements of each other. But Uranus may be very ambivalent in a group. You really might be. You enjoy sharing and being a part of something larger, and yet you're threatened by losing your individuality and freedom in the process. So you want to be part of a group, you want to help the masses, but you kind of want to do it on your own, if that makes sense, even though you love being connected to like-minded people. Now, on a personal level, you will generally have very strong feelings about the actual meaning of friendship and expect others to live up to these. And sometimes your high ideals may be unrealistic given the more selfish and an instinctive side of human nature. Don't beat yourself up about it. This is part of human nature. And this placement could indicate friends who serve as an important catalyst for change. So you can have friendships that end really abruptly, or something really crazy ultimately ends up happening. Or this could even manifest as something happening very abruptly with an older sibling, a stepchild, grandchild, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, that ends up being a catalyst for change. Now, likewise, you could be the agent who brings the fresh experience to your friends, your friend groups, to other people. A lot of people with this placement have a real fascination for slightly eccentric people who express sides of their natures that are typically not accepted by other people. You might have like pretty different friends, a little out of the box, a little out of the ordinary. And your goals and objectives in life could change radically in a relatively short span of time, right? As if you wake up one day with a new vision, which you must follow. Again, that 11th house also represents our goals and our gains. And it's like, what am I doing for the next 10 to 15 years? I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go in this direction. But there's going to be something very healing about embracing that freedom energy when it comes to working through your Chiron wounds, okay? And we'll talk about the placements on the axis in your chart next time. But until then, you guys take care. Have a good week. Okay, so Uranus in the 12th house or in the sign of Pisces. This placement represents the collective sea out of which we all emerge. Obviously, it's where we're in utero, within our mother, right? It's where we're in the world, but we're not, we're of the world, but we're not in the world, right? That is that energy. So those of you with Uranus here need to take a deep breath and jump in, not forgetting to bring your best diving gear, right? Because it's only through exploring the unconscious mind that you're going to be able to get a real sense of patterns in the life that you're living, and that's not for everybody. It's not. But whatever house Uranus is placed in, we have to take a risk and be different. And this is really asking you, in order to regain a sense of continuity with evolution, in order to get a clear sense of why you're here, and the whole process of everything, and why you're here, what it is that you need to learn, you have to dive deep and not be on the surface here. You can approach the whole unconscious realm in a very inventive way because it's Uranus. Uranus is very inventive, very out of the box, very intuitive, very original. So you have access to the mind's warehouse. You have access to ancestral wisdom. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but let me just say, depending on what's in your second house, you may have it upon your energy in this lifetime, not even saying upon your heart, but it's like put upon you in this energy to break ancestral patterns, to break away from things that have been, typically indicated, right, in your ancestral DNA and the ancestral experience, okay? Very common, and a lot of this is experience accrued in the past and through inherited and previous generations. So some of you with this placement find the key to unlocking this treasure through drugs, others through medication or a form of artistic expression, which allows you to tune in to these ancient records or experiences. Uranus in this house often has a very strong interest in political movements and ideologies, but in a rather compulsive as opposed to a reflective way. Uranus gets the rumblings of something before it happens. You kind of vibe it, you can feel it, but the reaction can be very explosive and unclear since this is all happening having to do with Neptune, right? Because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces and the landlord of the lord of the 12th house energy. Neptune is very confusing. No boundaries. There's no floor, no ceiling, right? Wherever Neptune is, it's like trying to look at that thick fog or dirty window, right? Reality should always be questioned whenever 12th house and or Pisces is involved. And from what I've observed, once this energy is evolved, anyone with this placement has a wealth of really, really good advice to offer others. However, your near vision is sometimes impaired by your own personal neuroses and complexes. So these will have to be cleaned up before the positive effects of this placement can be felt. You're also a lot more likely to be thrown off course by negative feelings in the atmosphere, right? You're very sensitive to the energy of others. You're very, somebody who has Chiron in Pisces, I can relate with this, right? Which is why a lot of times I wear crystals in my bra, or I do the sprays and I do, honestly, I want to just say psychologically for me, it's helpful. So just impart that, right? But you could easily be thrown, or you feel people's, negative energy. But regardless of how, Uranus is aspected in your particular chart, there's typically a very strong interest in spirituality and the parapsychology and astrology, right? There's a very deep-seated reluctance here as well, though, to relinquish your independence, right? And that can make it really hard for you to ever settle down or really kind of dig your roots into any one particular place. One part of you might desperately want closeness and security, but somehow you manage to get in your own way, preventing it from happening. And exploring your own unconscious motivations can free you from this situation, right? And health also. Looking at your health will help get in front of a lingering sense of loneliness and isolation, right? Because you can certainly have that, right? Some of you with this placement join secret societies or engage in behind the scenes work for groups. You may at some point in your life align yourself with institutions of a progressive or unusual nature as a way of channeling through like new ideas, new trends could be established. So a lot of Uranus in the 12th can be very, very creative, very progressive. You could revolutionize or be a disruptive energy. Within a larger institution that really does need some sort of positive disruption, right? That's like within a positive way. Now, periods of confinement or incarceration may produce surprising effects if that happens to be your experience. In a few cases, I've seen several people with this placement not acknowledge a need for temporary retreat from life, right? And where they just keep going and doing the wrong thing and they just keep going at it, and they consequently, they end up attracting accidents or illness or larger problems to themselves. So we have to be a little careful here. Sudden reversals of fortune are possible here. Something which seems ominous and threatening may turn out to be completely different from what you expect, and vice versa. It could be so beneficial for anyone with this placement to inquire about anything unusual which might have occurred in your mom's life, in your mother's life during the gestation period, because in some way this may have imprinted itself on your psyche, in the psyche of your developing embryo, so, could manifest like that. But remember, this is the house of the deep ocean, right? And so the strategy, right, because it's Uranus here, when it comes to healing your Chiron moon, is going to be to go deep and not be afraid to go there and really unpack these things and look at your motivations, right? We're going to talk more about the axis, like the location in your chart, that place that will ultimately manifest as healing Chiron next time. But again, Chiron sign, house placement, Saturn sign and house placement as where that weight is that grounds that Chiron energy in, and then Uranus sign and house placement. I hope this was helpful, guys. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.